And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution is not going to get that man today. No, because I'm going to get him.
This is the Hagmann and Hagmann report for today. It is a fabulous Friday edition. It's Friday, the 24th day of April, 2015. We're coming to you live from the Hagmann and Hagmann studios. I'm Doug Hagmann at the Helm with fellow investigator, researcher, and most importantly, my son, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann report, America's premier father-son investigative team. Our job is to bring you the news that shapes the headlines, the news that is shaped, twisted, convoluted, contorted, and hidden amid a funhouse of smoke and mirrors, well, in the carnival that we call the corporate media. We do the headline and news triage so you don't have to. Once again tonight, we'll be piercing that fog of disinformation and misinformation and misdirection, helping you see what's important, but are not meant to see. For new listeners, and we have many, want to say hello. As a matter of fact, John, thank you very much. I want to say hello to Gail from Kazakhstan, listening. Oh, my goodness gracious. God bless you, Gail. You know what? I'm going to screw this name up here. Elias, I'm sorry, not Elias. Elias? From Barcelona, Spain, Juan from Spain, Chris from Wales, UK, and for Elias, you can send me an email and correct my
taking pronunciation classes from.
Nah, you know what? I got to tell you, I wrote that name down very quickly when I was talking to John, and I'm so sorry. So you know who you are. You can send me an email and yell at me and say, this is my name. Oh man. Anyway. We broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Our home base on the internet is hagmanandhagmann.com. Boy, I'm going to be using this weekend to fill some space up on hagmanandhagmann.com in terms of material. We've got so much to get into, so much to report on.
Yeah.
We actually have just done so many investigations, and the research is just piling back up on us.
One thing that we did not, we mentioned this off air, had a chance to briefly discuss it off air, that I found that I wanted you to look at was a new publication from the Century for New American Security entitled Direct Energy Weapons, Promise and Prospects. And this talks about how the U.S. can invest in cost-effective, time-efficient manner for direct energy weapons, and it has a guidance. This is a guidance document making a series of recommendations on how to most effectively put these weapons to use. Now, I was baffled at some of the technology they already have ready to go that they use as for examples in these documents, things that we would not think they would even have, maybe even patents at this point.
Like what? I mean, let's give our audience a taste of what they've got.
A direct space, satellite-to-Earth laser weapon.
Right.
Is one, and that's, maybe people have heard about that before, but how about a frequency weapon that can basically make you spontaneously combust?
Isn't that interesting? They also have sound weapons that can make you ill. They've got and disoriented. Now these are street level weapons. I'm going to tell you, these now are street level weapons. The sound, you actually won't hear the sound in many cases. It depends on the weapon, but they've got weapons where they will disorient you, make you ill, violently ill.
They have what they call large aircraft infrared countermeasure systems, which are space-based weapon with direct energy capabilities, with the ability of integrating new technologies into the operations, attaching weaponized laser systems,
right?
To be used, they say, not
These are the
only
big ones now.
for human use, but they could disable vehicles. They could take down any type of other missile systems or weaponry that was fired. Say there was a launch of a North Korean missile over to our neck of the woods. They would be able to neutralize that missile from space via a satellite equipped with a laser weapon on it.
Right.
They have high energy lasers, direct energy lasers, high powered microwave lasers, and other radio frequency technology that is being enhanced by the Department of Defense and war fighters for flexible non-kinetic employment operations.
Well,
yeah,
it's really ridiculous out there in terms of the weapons, and a lot of these weapons are going to be deployed and are being deployed on U.S. soil. A lot of the weapons, or I shouldn't say a lot,
and they're being tested.
And some are being integrated with law enforcement agencies as well. Now it's just growing. That's just growing.
I know. I don't know if Steve's had a chance to check this out, but he'll because he's talked about this forever. The space-based lasers that we just discussed.
Right.
This is.
Oh, that's woo-woo stuff. No, that doesn't exist. No, those don't exist. Come on.
No, but this will be some confirmation. This stuff he's been working on for a long time.
Yeah.
And speaking of Steve, he will be joining us with Tim Alberino next week. Next Monday?
Mission accomplished with, and folks, okay. I got to tell you something. In talking with Steve Quayle, Tim Alberino and his crew went down to, I'm just not going to say, but they went down south, and they found some things that were just absolutely incredible that you're going to be hearing about on Monday. They were followed, harassed. You remember a while back when we had that call for somebody, a believer, experienced in special forces. Well, they hooked up. Of course, it had security. Went down with Tim Alberino and the crew, and it really needed that security because there was a lot of harassment down there. And I'm not going to ruin it for Monday, and I'm not talking out of school except to say that it seems like there is a lot of things a lot of things that are being hidden from public view with respect to the giants, and how the giants and people might roll their eyes and say, "Oh, come on, giants," but again, the technology and the DNA and all that stuff comes.
Every time I hear somebody, what you just described, rolling their eyes at giants, I just think of David and Goliath. Ever since I was a child in Sunday school, and
right,
we've learned the story of the Goliath, the giant, being slain by David with a rock. And this was...
But that's of yore. That's of old... That's of antiquity. It doesn't apply today. But see, they're searching the technology and the remains to bring it forth today. There's a whole new agenda. There's a whole big agenda behind this. And frankly, I was one of the guys that rolled my eyes back 10 years ago. I understood David and Goliath, but I didn't understand
even in the
Bible,
context
of today.
It says very plainly in the Bible, they, being the fallen angels, came down, mated with earthly women, and bore giants.
Right.
Also is another name for giants in the Hebrew lexicon is, tyrants, men of renown. They have a mythological connotation to them, but that's due mostly to the educational system in our society's view of them. But I think it's interesting that, when Christians are especially talking with the secular world and explaining or trying to talk about giants and the biblical history and how it has scientifically been proven, you get laughed at to your face, yet people turn around and watch shows like Ancient Alien Astronaut Theorists and believe that, all the biblical stories are directly due to these aliens that we have protecting us but don't know who they are, and people believe whole cloth in that without any evidence, proof. I mean, the aliens didn't leave a Bible, a manual. The aliens did not come here in the flesh and die for our sins. But this just shows the level of blindness and the level of deceit over the eyes of the public, and that goes for secular and Christian, and that is due to the Lord closing the eyes of those who refuse to believe the truth.
Exactly. It's just, and one thing too I want to mention before we get going further. Did you? And forgive me if we haven't said this, but Nathan Leal is going to be joining us at the bottom of the hour, right?
8:30.
Yeah. Okay, at the bottom of the hour, Nathan Leal will be joining us, and
he has some excellent new insight on Jade Helm on the. Specifically, there's a video on his website, watchmanscry.com, where he lays out what he found about the shoe that is on the logo, which underneath says Master the Human Domain.
Right.
And surprisingly enough, a few of our listeners who sent their interpretations of what they thought that shoe was via email had the same findings as Mr. Nathan.
Well, yeah, and I found that distinctly out of place, at least for me. And I happened to be watching on I think it was the American Heroes channel. I mean, they got so many channels now. I mean, I remember when there were 3 or 4 channels. My goodness. And now there's like,
I remember when there was a few channels.
Oh, my goodness. But anyway, I was looking for... I was looking. It was a day and time when I was looking for the God TV. Okay. Anyway, and I happened across this Nuremberg, or the work camps in Poland and the Nazi. Yeah. And they were actually they showed a pile of clothing, and in one section were shoes. And the shoes were not unlike the picture on Jade Helm, the wooden clogs. And, of course, the voiceover on that was the workers wore those shoes, or those people who worked in the concentration camps in particular. So there is something there. And I also happened to find, and I didn't tell anyone this, I didn't tell Nathan this, or even you this, but on the Internet, there was an article in the Army Times that, by itself, it's pretty meaningless. It actually took to task anyone who talked about Jade Helm as being some sort of a conspiracy. And it was March 23rd, 2015 article in the Army Times.
It is a conspiracy.
Well, yeah, it said this. The title was "Conspiracy Groups Question USA SOC Mission in Texas." Okay, it paints a picture of the fringe groups having unwarranted concern about military training exercises on U.S. soil.
Unwarranted concern.
Right. The article states the Joint Unconventional Warfare exercise is going to consist of 1,200 service members, including special forces from all 4 branches, Marine Expeditionary Forces, and the 82nd Airborne Division. Now, that's what the article says. And okay, fine. So we'll just take it at its face. And again, this is from March 23rd, 2015, article in the Army Times. As I dug down through this article, I found a link to an article that it was about a year old, and from that article I found a PDF file, and this is where it gets kind of screwy here, a PDF file it's USAWC Civilian Research Project. Now, just folks and Joe, I just want you to listen, because this caught my attention. It's a 27-page PDF document, Institutionalizing Interdependence, U.S. Army Special Operations Forces, Conventional Forces, and then the subtitle, No Turning Back. All right. Now, so far, all well and good. U.S. Army War College, Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. Typical stuff, right? Typical stuff. Okay, and it starts off pretty boring and pretty dull, pretty routine, and gets into some history about conventional warfare. But what caught my attention is about halfway, maybe a little bit more than halfway through, it talks about mastering the human domain. And we're going back now. Did I give the date on that document? I don't think I did I?
I don't remember.
All right, let me just pull this back up here. Because this is...
And to back up what you were talking about, I found a new Business Insider article. Walmart mysteriously closes 5 stores, and some people have a wacky conspiracy theory about why. And it gets into the 5 stores that closed around California.
Well, who's calling it wacky?
This author.
Yeah, but
they go on to say that the retailer closed its stores in California, Texas, Oklahoma, and Florida because of persistent plumbing issues that could take as long as 6 months to fix. 2,200 workers were laid off and given and as a result, given 2 months of severance pay. But some critics are skeptical that Walmart closed the stores because of plumbing issues. Officials in the 5 cities which Walmart closed stores say the company hasn't sought permits for plumbing work. According to ABC News, additionally, Walmart plumbing technician who worked at the now shuttered store in Brandon, Florida, told WFLA that even if the stores are replacing its entire sewage line, the work shouldn't take as long as 6 months. A labor group, the UFCW, has workers who are laid off, contends that the company closed the stores in retaliation against workers organizing for better pay, which is something Walmart has been found guilty of doing in Canada. Now, the closures have also fueled a bizarre conspiracy theory that the U.S. military is planning to enact martial law this summer under the guise of special operations exercise called Jade Helm 15. According to the theory, which has no apparent basis in reality, the military will use shuttered Walmart stores as processing facilities for Americans once martial law is hatched. A video raising suspicions about this theory has been watched nearly 500,000 times since it's posted. Was 2 days ago. They go on to say that there's no truth to the rumors, according to a Walmart spokesperson, Lorenzo Lopez, who told the Business Insider that it hasn't sought plumbing permits yet because the company is still considering additional upgrades to the building and wants to file all necessary permits simultaneously.
Well, that's look, that could very well be.
It goes on to say that the military has routinely launched exercises in the past in which regions of the United States are identified as hostile for the purpose of training.
Right.
I'm not familiar with those, are you?
Well, yeah. Okay.
Military. Okay, they say that the military has routinely launched exercises in the past in which regions of the United States are identified as hostile for purposes of training.
Right. Now this. Okay. What you're saying right there. Yes. What you're saying there goes back to the PDF I was referencing when you stopped it. Yeah. Okay. This PDF file, it's dated back in 2013. The Army Times article does state that they did a similar operation back last year, meaning 2014. But the link within the article that notes the 2014 exercise points back to a 2013 PDF, as I mentioned earlier, about the Civilian Research Project, institutionalizing interdependence. Okay, this is where this comes into play here. So are they being truthful when they said that this has happened in the past? Yes, but if you look at the 27-page PDF, it is not, or the article that points to it from 2014 about the exercise, it was not as, number one, it was not as visible, and number two, it certainly was not as large as this. It didn't have all these agencies involved. All right, and there was little, if any, interaction between the military and the law enforcement side. But yes, according to this PDF, and you have to view it in the context of its date, which is 2013, it does mention, for example, it goes back to mastering human domain. Okay. Without getting into the entire document, because it's boring, it's long, and it's painful to read. Okay, I mean, I'll just be right up front.
It's not like a Paul McGuire book.
No, and I've read a lot of court cases, and I mean, this is like, my gosh, I couldn't wait to get to page 27 on this one. Anyway, but see what what they're doing here, or at least according to this 2013 PDF, is they're insinuating or inserting military special operation forces based on the interpretations of Sun Tzu, The Art of War, where they're attempting to subdue an enemy without fighting. Okay, and how they're looking at this, and this is something that is a common thing. We talked with the theme. We talked about this before. If you're able to subdue, we'll say the constitutionalists or the constitutionalist people who are pro-constitution, or people who will not allow military operations on U.S. soil based on the Constitution. If you're able to change their mind or subdue them without firing upon them, that's a better way to do it. So they're inserting people in there in an attempt to, number one, measure the feelings of people, and number two, change public form, mold public opinion. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They did this once in the past. Now, to say that it's been done numerous times, perhaps in much lesser instances, but at least the year before they did it, but not to the extent, and I'm not even sure it was even named Jade Helm. I could not find anything named Jade Helm authoritatively. Okay.
You know that in Canada they're holding similar drills called Maple Reserve.
Right. And see, there are, as we talked early, in March we talked about this, and we said that every state is going to have a drill like this, but not necessarily under the direct umbrella of Jade Helm.
Yeah, and we're seeing other drills taking place today. I saw this, which was fairly interesting. Military holds decontamination exercise in city. A fake rental truck with a fake dirty bomb inside triggered a practice military response Friday in Battle Creek. Army National Guard members converged on a parking lot outside ABC Warehouse at 5700 Beckley Road for training and an evaluation of the response to the critical incident. A similar exercise was held earlier this week at C.O. Brown Stadium, and more will be held next week at the stadium and the former W.K. Kellogg Middle School. 160 members of the 460th Chemical Company of the Army National Guard, based at Fort Custer Training Center in Augusta, participated Friday, as well as civilian volunteers who played victims of the incident. The military units were trained to respond to chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear incidents, according to the 460th Executive Officer, First Lieutenant Travis Williams. The exercises this week and next are to determine whether units are prepared to respond quickly to a nuclear incident. They were testing and doing exercises for dirty bombs.
Well, and some people might argue that that's a good thing,
is it a good thing?
No. Yeah, well,
to test the readiness of first responders and such, yes. Is it a good thing to do so in the public? No.
No, that's what, police academies. They've got police academies. They've got military bases. They've got actual cities that are built, or think of a Hollywood town that's built, for a Hollywood set. They've got those, all right? What they don't have are the people, the human domain. So this whole process, and really we have to look at this not just not just with Jade Helm. We have to look at going back in history to understand the larger picture here. You got to go back and understand how we got here, because understanding how we got here will tell you what's going to happen next. Now, look, the way I see this is Jade Helm is an exercise that is not going to end in September. Yeah, that might be the official ending date, but it's going to continue. The assets will continue. The intelligence gathering will continue. Will it be under that specific name, Jade Helm, that it began with? I don't know. But it doesn't matter? Probably not. But the more and more I'm looking at this as the flash bang that is getting people to take their eyes on, put their focus on. And they want you to see. This is a stage show, in my view, because we had a saying in surveillance when Joe and I did surveillance, and my partner Chuck, who's passed away now, we talked about this at length because I worked with him for a number of years, and Jim, who's also passed, worked with him for, my goodness, 15 years. But both of us, both of them, I should say, and we used to talk about this. When you're on a surveillance or a stakeout, it's not what you see that is going to get you. It's what you don't see. It's the thing that you never see coming. Because, for example, if you're sitting in a, and this has happened to us, you're sitting in a surveillance van in Brooklyn, and you might be there for 2 days. And for example, down the road, down the street, there might be a small group of people that know you're there, looking at you, kind of facing, and so you're watching them, and you're concerned about them, right? It's not them that you're going to be kicking out of the back of your van. It's going to be the people you never saw coming. So the way I look at it is this: Jade Helm is a flashbang, and I think we have to be paying very close attention to what's going on behind the scenes. So,
absolutely, an article I wanted to hit on. We've had guests throughout the whole week, and if you didn't get a chance to tune in this week, Monday we had Pastor Langford and Steve Quayle for a fantastic show. Tuesday, Stan Dale was with us, as he is every Tuesday. Wednesday, Bob Fletcher was our guest, and what a show that was. Just a treasure trove of information, as well as Ted Breuer yesterday. He was on with us, healthmasters.com. So
they're all on they're all on SoundCloud as well. The folks, just to those who are listening, obviously you've got Blog Talk Radio, which you can download the archives from there, and usually it's 165 megabytes, and people say, wow, that's just a big file. Well, on SoundCloud, I've got them down to 65, 61 megabyte files, okay, on SoundCloud, without any compromised quality of audio. So you can also download them, from our past show page. They're right there. So I just want to mention that. But
yeah, and Nathan should be with us any minute. But here's an article I wanted to hit earlier in the week. As we had a full week of guests, we did not get too much time to spend into the news. This is an older article, actually from the 10th, April 10th, which is 2 weeks ago. And I think this is vitally important. City Economist says it might be time to abolish cash. The world's central banks have a problem. When economic conditions worsen, they react by reducing interest rates in order to stimulate the economy. But as has happened across the world in recent years, there comes a point where those central banks run out of room to cut. They can bring interest rates to zero, but reducing them further below that is fraught with problems, the biggest of which is cash in the economy. In a new piece, Citi's William Brutier looks at this problem, which is known as the effective lower bound on nominal rates. Fundamentally, the ELB problem comes down to cash. According to Brutier, the ELB only exists at all due to the existence of cash, which is the bearer instrument that pays zero nominal rates. What you have, your money on deposits at a negative rate, that reduces your wealth when you can have it in cash and suffer no reduction. Cash, therefore, gives people an easy and effective way to avoid negative nominal rates. So what they're saying is, instead of having your, say you have $10,000 in a bank and getting, we'll say 2% interest every year at $1,000, that would be what, $20 a year. And when you have negative interest rates, you would be paying $20 a year. It would be taking money away from your bank account. But this is one of a few economic articles we wanted to get into if we had time. And here's another one that is more recent. Economic Policy Journal. The Bankster War on Cash. J.P. Morgan Chase begins to prohibit storage of cash in its safety deposit boxes. That is a very interesting headline. It goes on to say, letters are apparently going out to some J.P. Morgan Chase customers announcing that cash will be prohibited from being stored in the bank safety deposit boxes. At the Collectors Universe message board, a commenter reports, my mother has a SDB at a Chase branch with one of my siblings as co-signer. Last week, they got a letter outlining a number of changes to the lease agreement, including this. Contents of the box. You agree not to store any cash or coins other than those found to have a collectible value. Another change is that signatures will no longer be accepted to access the box. The next time they go in to have to bring 2 forms of ID, they will be issued a 4-digit PIN number that will be used to access the box then and in the future. Professor Joseph Salerno of the Mises Institute writes, as of March, Chase began restricting the use of cash in selected markets, including Greater Cleveland. The new policy restricts borrowers from using cash to make payments on credit cards, mortgages, equity lines, and auto loans. Chase even goes as far as to prohibit the storage of cash in its safe deposit boxes. In a letter to its customers dated April 1st, 2015, pertaining to its updated safe deposit box lease agreements, one of the highlighted items reads, you agree not to store any cash, coins, or other than those found to have a collectible value. Just last week, Citigroup top economist William Boutier wrote a report calling for the abolishment of cash as a sound policy, and that's the article I just read to you. So here we have 2 different economic reports talking about, 1, abolishing cash, 2, J.P. Morgan continuing its all-out war on cash as they are banning any type of currency, that be money or gold and silver, to be stored in their your safety deposit boxes in their banks. And interestingly enough, it goes on to say that J.P. Morgan Chase will be restricting the use of cash in selected markets, including cash payments to make on credit cards, mortgages, equity lines, and auto loans. Very troubling news to hear coming from some of the biggest banks in the country. They're trying to move away from a cash society, and they're moving ahead with experimental pilot policies that seem to be taking them in that direction. Now, this story, I see Nathan's not with us yet, so I'm going to hit this story. This is something my dad and me talked about at length a few nights in a row after the show. I don't know how many of you guys heard of this out there. The head transplant man. A man is volunteering himself to have his head transplanted on a donor's body. The 30-year-old Russian is a man who has a debilitating muscular disease and wants to be the first donor, or the first person to have a head replacement. Well,
seeking immortality.
There is a new article out. This head transplant man will be attached to a new body in under 1 hour, and aim is immortality, doctors say. The Italian doctor who claimed that he could transplant a man's head onto a donor's body has said that he could do much of the procedure in less than an hour. Now, remember, the first article with doctors said it would take over 150 nurses in 36 hours. This one says under an hour. A procedure that Canavero has admitted is the first step towards the ultimate aim of creating immortality. We will see a man's head removed and placed on a donor's body. That will see the man's head get cooled down, as it is when doctors operate on some parts of the brain, switched onto a different body. The doctors then have a few minutes to attach blood vessels, and the whole thing will take less than an hour, the doctor said.
Hey, it beats the time of a appendicitis, or no. You just have to wonder about this.
Listen to the cost. Guess how much this is going to cost?
I wouldn't have a clue.
$15 million. $15 million. The doctor said he needs to carry out the surgery, and he compared that to what the people in pro sports are paid. He said, "Do you love football?" "Well, I hate it," he said to a Russian newspaper. "Nonetheless, you have slackers who meaninglessly stroll around and pitch and are paid $20 to $30 million a year. I just need $15 for the price of happiness for a lot of people, but sponsors prefer spending money on a healthy boneheads who can kick the ball rather than immortality."
Look, we are. I mean, that's just. It should speak to the where we're at as a society, the morality of our society. Anyone who would do that, I mean, is ghoulish. You talk about ghoulish. That's the epitome of ghoulish, and people are walking around thinking that this is okay. Right?
This guy's not going to have to buy a Halloween costume for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Well, without any further ado, joining us now is the one and only Mr. Nathan Leal. His website is Watchman.
Before we bring Nathan on, I just want to give just a really great, and I apologize for taking Nathan's time, but I must do this. I just want to say thank you so much to the Art Doctor, custom graphics, full service printing, website design, desktop publishing, theartdoctor.org. Susan, of course, mentioned prominently in the Paul McGuire's books, including Mass Awakening. New cover. Thank you, Susan. God bless you and Paul McGuire. What a great job you do. It's just fantastic. Anyway, just thought folks, if you haven't gotten Mass Awakening yet, it's a great, fantastic, honest to goodness, one of Paul's, if not the best work. Well, I would say it's his best work. It really is the most important book you'll ever read. That's Mass Awakening from Paul McGuire. And again, Susan Ramsey, what a great job you've done on putting that cover together. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you for allowing me to do that. Mr. Nathan Leal, it's great to have you on.
Thank you, gentlemen, for bringing me on again. And I want to just say up front, if my voice sounds a little bit off, I'm recovering from a bout with the flu, strep throat, laryngitis, all that good stuff over the past few weeks. It came through my whole family. It's actually in our town. And you know what's interesting, Doug, is you were mentioning earlier about weapons, odd weapons, weird weapons.
Yep.
They've done a lot of chemtrail spraying over the last few months here where I live, and it makes you wonder what's in their soup, and are they purposely doing this to weaken the population? Because it seems like everybody I talk to is struggling with an ongoing bout with bronchitis, strep throat, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, that's just a side note. But I did finally go to the doctor, one of the clinics, the urgency care, and you just pay out of your pocket. It's not part of Mr. O's operation. And I took the medication, so now I'm feeling better. So that's where I am. But thanks for having me on, gentlemen. I talked to you a week or two ago, and I think I could barely speak at that point, Joe. And so I thank you for offering your prayers and letting the people know that I needed prayers, because I do believe that they worked and they helped. So
they
it's
do.
Good to be here.
And it's great to, you do sound good. I have to say you sound better than you did, I think it was a week ago. Was it a week ago, maybe? Yeah.
It was.
Okay. Well,
anyway, so here we are, and I also want to say this. I have finally entered, as of last night, the Earthquake Club here in northern Idaho. We had 3 earthquakes yesterday. For the first time, I felt them, a 4.1, a 4.2, and then a 3.3, which isn't enough to do damage, but I never knew what it felt like to be in an earthquake. And for the second one, it was about 10:30 at night. I was sitting in the backyard on a chair just talking to my wife, look over a campfire, looking at the stars. And if you've never been in an earthquake, it was weird. It sounds like, well, this one did. It sounded like thunder in the distance, maybe 10 miles away, the rolling thunder that you hear in the distance when there's a thunderstorm. That's what it sounded like. And then about 3 to 5 seconds later, the ground started shaking, and it shook for about 5 seconds. Firewood fell off the stack, and chandeliers started moving. So it was real interesting to experience that.
Well, you heard it first, and then you felt it, right?
Yeah. I didn't know that I never knew. I mean, I've seen the earthquake movies, and you hear that rumble sound. I just thought that was Hollywood, but no, you really do. It sounds like thunder, or this one did. It was interesting.
Wow. Yeah, we had an earthquake up here in northwest Pennsylvania. It was centered probably, 40 miles west of us, but it I don't know, it was between 3 and 4. And
how long ago was this?
15 years ago. Yeah.
This is when I was talking with Nathan before the show, and he asked
maybe
if I
20
ever
years ago
had felt an earthquake. And I remember being in my grandparents' garage, and the garage door was on an automatic opener, and it was open. And it just started rattling. You just heard this rattle, and that was
amazing.
it. Went inside and found out there was an earthquake.
Yeah, well, I guess congratulations for being in the earthquake club now, or
yeah.
And of course, our friends and brethren over in California are probably laughing. Oh, are you really, Nathan? A 4.2? How cute?
Yeah.
Anyway, it was interesting.
Wow.
So, gentlemen,
Nathan, you've done some great work. I just want to point out one thing, Nathan. Before you came on the show, and I'm going to be sending you this. Before I forget, I just want to mention this. I'm just going to be sending you a PDF file. It's one that I don't believe you have. It's dated 2013, and it gets into some of the human domain, mastering the human domain that I don't believe you've got. So it's important background that I'll be sending to you. I mentioned this on air before you came on, but I just want to let you know it's from the War College, and it does talk about previous human domain.
By the way, gentlemen, do I sound okay? Because on this end, it sounds like you're cutting in and out.
You sound good.
Sound all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could be us.
Maybe so.
Let me try something here. But go ahead, Nick.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Anyway, gentlemen, I have been on a mission the last several weeks, just digging and researching Jade Helm. And the interesting thing about this entire operation is that it spans every area of our being. You know, we're 3 dimensions: body, spirit, soul, and body. And Jade Helm is, I believe, going to play a role in the future of the freedom of America. Now, Doug, I appreciate the way that you word Jade Helm, because I don't think that it's just going to be a one-time operation, and I'm not necessarily sure if it's just going to be if we can look at it cut and dry like some people are, some of the well-meaning people out there that are saying it's going to be this and that's it. I think it's wiser to approach it from the standpoint of leaving the door open for a lot of possibilities, because if we include Bible prophecy in the narrative, in our viewpoint, or in our perspective, then we have to admit that at some point in time, and I know I say this a lot, but I can't get away from it, at some point in time, the New World Order will take over the world, the beast will rise up, we'll have the great tyrant overseeing the entire planet. We'll have a police state in every area of the planet, all 4 corners, because the Bible tells us that it's going to be that way. So if that's going to be the future of the world, then we have to work backwards from that, and then we have to ask the question, when you take into consideration all the different countries that exist, west, east, in all the hemispheres, both hemispheres, there's going to be changes and morphing take place in the governmental systems of any given country, including the West. That means that the United States is going to go from where we are now or where we were 20 years ago. We've already morphed somewhat, but we're going to morph even more until we get to that location where tyranny will be the law of the land, the rule of the day, and there's no stopping it. We're not going to be able to stop it because it's Bible prophecy, and that's the other thing that we need to consider. This is God. This is the Bible. This is the future of man. This is how mankind will sum up his short visitation on earth to see the return of Jesus someday. So before Jesus returns, we're going to see the mayhem and the chaos of the Great Tribulation. So if we work backwards from that, we're going to see tyranny we're going to see the extractions. We're going to see concentration camps, detentions, persecution of Christians, and all the political dissidents in any given area. So Jade Helm is a part of that big plan. And so, Doug, I appreciate that you word it in the way that you do, that there's a lot more coming. And in order for them to really be able to pull this thing off in the magnificent evil genius method scheme that they have in the books and that they have discussed, and that the supercomputers of the New World Order beasts have come up with, they have to do a few practice sessions. They have to do war games. They have to do a few operations to see what the results are going to be. And then they tally them and they make adjustments. But that's what this thing is a part of. So that being said, though, I still believe that there is a lot of nefarious things that are a part of Jade Helm. Now, the article that you cited, the veteran article, I saw that yesterday, Doug, and it was just annoying to read. That, I mean, are we that stupid?
Yeah.
You know, if we take events that have already happened, all a person has to do is just, put Jade Helm aside, and let's look at the militarization of police forces in America. Let's look at the MRAPs, all the bullets, the continual legislation that's robbing us of freedom. We can see that there are already nefarious things taking place. We see habeas corpus and posse comitatus has an expiration. So for a veteran to write an article to appease the masses, it's just silly to watch. But at the same time, it makes sense from their point of view, because according to Scripture, the Bible says the beasts will use deception to trick everybody, to betray and deceive everyone. That means that we're going to see articles that are silly, like the one that you cited, and we're going to see the talking heads try to dismiss those who are alarmed and concerned over what's happening. You know, Doug, if we were to just look at what Mr. Zero's doing in the White House, it boggles the mind that he's gotten this far. But you're exactly right. He's using the tactics of Sun Tzu, and how amazing is it that he has been able to occupy and destroy and shred the last remaining pieces of the Constitution already without firing one shot. How is that possible? Well, it's through deception. It's through appeasing the masses. It's by using what you and I talk about many times, and it has to do with the mind bender, the operations that they have become mastery at and very good at. And when we look again at the Bible says God will send a delusion. Deception will take place. Matthew 24 says many will betray one another. And here's a question to ask. What would cause people to betray one another? Well, Jesus says one of the main reasons is because their spiritual condition grows cold. So because people, including Christians, are not where they're supposed to be spiritually, they will be fuel for deception. So Jade Helm is going to be a part of that. As we go into what I'm going to share tonight, I have a lot of very serious information. I don't know if I'm going to be able to cover all of it. By the way, Doug, did you have a chance to see the video that I just put out?
Twice.
Okay. So you're familiar with it. And I want to say up front, and we're going to talk about that. I want to say up front, Doug and Joe, listeners, wherever you are, in whatever corner of the planet that you are, the challenge that I have to throw out is a challenge that must include the spiritual challenge. If you want to make it, if you really want to endure, if you want to survive the things that are coming in the end times, you have to include having the counsel of God and trying your best to get a hold of the mind of God and having the mind of Christ. Because if you don't, Doug, anyone can be deceived. Anyone. The Bible tells us in the book of Daniel, chapter 12, that the wise will understand, but the wicked will not understand as these things take place. Those that are refined, those that are wicked will not understand. That's found in Daniel 12, verse 9. When Daniel was shown images of the end times, of our times, he didn't understand everything, and he asked the angel, please explain this. And the angel said, in 12:9. Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. That means Daniel didn't even get to understand. Many shall be purified. Now, this is talking about the temperature and the climate that's going to be happening at the end of time, which I would venture to say is right now. Many shall be purified. That means a lot of people are going to be struggling and going through trouble, through trials, and through tribulation. Already that has begun with the great crash of 2008. There's a lot of people unemployed. People are struggling financially. That's the beginning of the purification process. So I want to say this, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, if you're struggling, you think God's mad at you, this is a part of the purification process that Jesus is doing to his people in the end days, in the last days, because he cares about you. And he wants to knock off.
What do you mean by that? Nathan, what do you mean if you feel like God is mad at you? That's my interest. What do you mean by that?
Well, when people go through trials, see, the new version of the gospel that we see and hear in many megachurches places the gospel in this box that says, you'll be blessed, all will be well, you'll be happy, you know, the Joel Osteen gospel, everything's going to go great for you because God loves you and you're just going to prosper and everything's going to be great. Well, that's not what the Bible says. Jesus said, in the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome. And if you want to summarize the appearance of the Christian, if a Christian is getting purified in these last days, that means God cares about you. If you're struggling, my friend, out there, that means God loves you. If you're not struggling and everything is great, then I don't know, maybe that's something to worry about. God loved Job, and this is a very interesting, gross way to picture the love of God through trials, but it's like this. We see and we read about Job sitting by the fire, taking pieces of the pottery and scraping his boils. He scraped the pus off his arms and his legs and his stomach. Remember that? That was gross.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Watch this, Doug and Joe and ladies and gentlemen. That's an illustration of Christianity. When we go through trials, the pus that is inside of us that we've tolerated needs to come to the surface and it needs to be scraped off. That's what trials are for. So every one of us have junk inside, and God wants to get rid of it. And so when we go through trials, like Job did, the pus needs to rise to the surface so God can get rid of it. So anyway, I'm not trying to digress, but I'm reading from Daniel 12:9. It says, many shall be purified, made white, and refined. The refining process is going to occur in whichever way God chooses. And this is the part that's hard to share. It's hard to accept. It's hard to receive. But this is the Bible, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're struggling, whether it's a health problem, a financial problem, a relationship, whatever it is, there's a reason for it. So the wise person will embrace it and surrender to it and then allow God to use it as a way to purify you, wherever you are, so that you can be a part of that group that it got refined, that is ready for when Jesus finally harvests the earth and gets us out of here. So it goes on, though. Many shall be purified, made white, and refined. But then it goes on to say this, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand. They're not going to get it. But the wise shall understand. This is very important, ladies and gentlemen. When we look at all of the things that are going on in this world, if you have not resolved in your heart to understand the mind of God and the mind of Christ, and if you have not got to the point in your life where you surrender to God and you finally admit that maybe there's things that you need to get rid of in your life that you shouldn't be tolerating, because I know how it is living in Babylon, Doug. Christians tolerate stuff. They justify them. But God wants to get rid of those things. But if a person does not want to surrender them, then are they really in the category of the righteous or the wicked? I would say, let's just be honest. There is no righteousness if you're playing around with Babylon. So if that's the case, if you have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, if you're not there yet, which, by the way, Doug, a lot of people are going to get there that aren't there yet. They struggle, and they don't know if they ever will. But when the heat gets turned up, that's going to help us knock off some of the junk that we tolerate. So when you are in the location where you're not supposed to be, there is going to be blindness. It's going to be hard to really hear truth, and we're going to struggle and battle to hear the real truth. And that being said, Doug, that means that operations like Jade Helm or whatever scheme the New World Order is doing are going to work to deceive. Now, let's now place our well-meaning brethren, whichever group they might be a part of, militia members, patriot members. Doug, I get emails from people that cannot wait to pull the trigger. They can't wait.
I know.
Any excuse that they get, they can't wait to. I got an email last night that said they can't wait to kill cops and soldiers, and they cannot wait. And when they get to heaven, they're going to receive a crown. People believe that to be trigger happy is somehow equated with righteousness, and ladies and gentlemen, it's not. Now, I'm not saying self-defense is not righteous. If the time arrives where you need to defend the innocent or your family, that's one thing. But to be trigger-happy and bloodthirsty, that is not the mind of Christ. We have to operate in a manner that supersedes the normal. So, Doug, Jade Helm, I've wondered about this. Is it possible that part of the mind-bender motive behind Jade Helm is to throw it out there just to see how people will react?
Yes.
And they're tallying the responses?
Yes.
Is that possible?
You know what, Nathan? Look, the more I look at this, and I've done this, I talked to a good friend out of Buffalo, New York, Tom Bowerly. He's on WBEN, and we talked about Jade Helm, and he's shared some stuff with me. I can't really talk about, but I'll just say this: from all my research, Nathan, it is consistent with your findings, but the bottom line here, Jade Helm is something that's going to be started and has been going on in different contexts and under different names and using via different departments, but it's something that will not go away, and it's multifaceted. It's perhaps one of the. Think of the New Year's Eve ball, the ball on New Year's Eve. You know, all of the triangular crystal shapes that are on that ball. I don't know how many thousands. That's Jade Helm, and each flat triangular surface is one aspect of Jade Helm. That, to me, is what we're looking at.
Indeed, and I fully agree. And Doug, in the second hour, we're going to go into that white paper. Isn't it interesting? Most of their white papers are a chore to try to get through. But we're going to talk about one of them, the Cognitive Joint Force Entry White Paper. I believe you have that one. And we're also going to talk about the video that I just did. So do you want to take a break now, or do you want to continue?
Yeah, we can take a break now, Nathan. And you did a fantastic job, folks. Please, I would urge everyone to go to Nathan's website. If you go to hagmanandhagmann.com, right on the right-hand side is information about our program tonight. But obviously, Nathan's website, if you watchmanscry.com, that's watchmanscry.com. It's linked off of Hagmann and Hagmann. Take a look at that video. It's what, I think 11 minutes, 12 minutes, Nathan? I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and very well done, and extremely. In fact, you're going to have to give me lessons on how to do these videos, Nathan. I have to tap into you for that. Hang with us, folks. We're right back. Hi, folks. Doug Hagmann here. I want to tell you, you heard Nathan talking about Jade Helm. You heard us talking about different headlines. And one headline we didn't get to is the soon-to-be criminalization of cash. Now, I've had recent experiences with, let me just say this. I can guarantee you, ladies and gentlemen, cash will be criminalized. The possession of, use of cash outside of any type of oversight system, it will be criminalized. Now, it might not happen tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, but within our lifetimes, it's going to happen. The reason they need to know everything and they need that control. Why do I bring this up now? Because while you still can, and that's important. You might not think year. I mean, we don't know. We don't know if it can be a year, a month, a week, or 10 years. We don't know. It doesn't matter. when you're looking at long-term food storage, 20 years, 35 years, right? 35-year shelf life, 30-year shelf life. Think American Survival Wholesale. It's a Christian-owned, veteran-owned company. All right. There are partners in this radio endeavor, and I'll tell you something. They are the best. If you want the Rolls Royce, not the Cadillac, but the Rolls Royce of freeze-dried food. If you want the Rolls Royce of service. If you want that personal touch, if you want someone who really cares about you, and I mean that. No lip service here. They care. If you want to deal with a company that is golden in terms of the way they operate in accordance with biblical principles, the scriptural principles, or is it the scripture? It's American Survival Wholesale. Now, look, I'm not going to go through all the products they have. You can do that, and I urge you to do that before it's too late, before you don't have that opportunity. Go to AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. Take advantage of the sales. Do it while you can. If you're sensing urgency in my voice, it's because I have urgency. Because over the last 90 days, I have been subjected to some of the most invasive type of oversight or investigative inquiries I've ever seen. And I can see where this whole thing is going. I can see where it's going. I've got personal experience. Trust me when I tell you, you want to do this sooner rather than later. So rather than focus on the products, I'm focusing on the urgency. Go to AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. Make a list, what you need, what you can to scrape up the money. Hey, even if it's a can, 2 cans, 3 cans, or some other survival product, just start. Start today. It's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. Great people, great product, great service. AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com.
God is calling us back to publicity. He's calling us back to the Bible. He's calling us back to depth. That's every home should be a house of learning. That what you get at church to supplement what you're doing and what you're studying all week long. And it's time that all of our homes become homes of learning to get into the Word of God and to deal with hard subjects and to deal with the hard subjects in our life. Anything that the devil has been having you run from is the very things that God needs you to run to get you free. And we're entering into a season that God is going to supernaturally open up the Word of God to you like never before. He's going to give you the ability in this season, if you'll simply be obedient, to face your giants and to take them down and to prepare you for the days ahead. And I believe that we can see revival in America. I believe that we can see big things turn around, and I do believe there's going to be some judgment. But one of the things that God keeps speaking to both my wife and I are spot judgment. That God is big enough to judge the elite while setting his people free. And I believe that if we'll get on our knees and to repent and return back to the Word of God and return back to being a people of prayer and a people of the Word, that we can begin seeing God do that. God needs to judge some things for Pharaoh and what they've been setting up so that we could be free to begin sharing the gospel again, and I mean the real gospel, where we can make sin and make people feel it. We need to enter into a time like Jonathan Edwards, that when we're preaching about sin, people need to feel the fires of hell. When they do, they're going to realize the splendor of the cross and what Jesus did for us and how precious our salvation is and how God has been calling us out of Babylon and to begin walking with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, because God has something he wants to make one of each one of us. He has a purpose for us. He has a power for us. And he has been waiting for us to lay down Babylon so that we can begin learning how to walk in it. And that's where we're at right now in the body of Christ.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of this Friday, April 24th, 2015 edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Our guest tonight Nathan Leal, his website, watchmanscry.com. Bookmark his website. He has excellent content that he puts up there, not just pertaining to radio shows he does, but for personal teachings, sermons, and messages. He has that there, as well as a interactive forum. If people want to get acquainted with one another and have some fellowship, join Nathan's forum. That's watchmanscry.com.
Yeah. Nathan, we're so glad to have you back, buddy. And I'll tell you, you do so much work. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you right now, I don't know when Nathan sleeps, eats, and spends time with his family, but I could tell you this: he's 24/7. It seems like doing doing a lot of research. Please don't take his research lightly. Please do not, consider what he's saying. And perhaps this is the wrong word, the esoteric or the deeper meaning of his research is extremely important, and he's spot on. So we thank him for that, and certainly he's deserving of our support. Nathan, welcome back.
Thank you, gentlemen. Getting back in, we have 2 hours. I'm going to try to squeeze as much as we can. To start out with, though, gentlemen, it's so important that the listeners can get a hold of this. The spiritual battle is going to take a huge role, play a huge role in what's even starting now. It's already been in motion, but even starting now, we can already sense that darkness is here over America. And it's interesting. We talked about this very thing several years ago, Doug, and many of your guests. There's other watchmen out there and regular folks that have seen the darkness coming, and regular folks can now feel it. I've heard secular people say darkness is now over America. So now here we are. Darkness, that thing that you feel, folks, that's oppressive, demonic, dark forces from the netherworld, from the underworld, from the satanic world. We can actually feel the evil that's here in America. Now, this thing has not always been here. If we went back 20 years, we didn't feel that. I've spoken to a lot of people, Doug, who tell me they remember where they could walk into a church and the presence of God would, this is 20 years ago, the presence of God would just be there, and you'd sing a few songs, simple songs, didn't take much effort, and God's presence would be in the atmosphere, and it was easy to connect with Him. The heavens were not brass. It felt like it was very easy to make contact with the presence of God. Today, I've heard from people who tell me it's a struggle. It's like their prayers bounce off the ceiling. The heavens are now brass. And that's not just limited to different individuals. By the way, listener, if you may be experiencing that, that's the temperature of America. That's going on here. That's not happening in other countries necessarily, but now it's here in America. I remember hearing 20, 30 years ago how if you went to a voodoo country like Haiti or Jamaica or some places in Middle America where they practice voodoo, the oppressive spirits were easily felt, but in America they weren't. Well, now here we are. That darkness that's here is getting stronger and stronger. It's like a sludge in the air. So it's going to wreak havoc on people, and it's going to play games with the minds of people. It's going to be harder to spiritually try to connect with God, and that's why it's going to take more discipline to be spiritually awake and spiritually sound. But I'm saying this because it still is possible. It takes a little bit longer to make a connection with God in your prayer closet, but that's why it's even more important, gentlemen, that we do our part to discipline ourselves to make a connection with God, because if we don't, that darkness is going to deceive. I cannot say that enough. And the battle is going to take place in the spiritual realm as well as the mental realm. Satan is going to make sure, and this is already happening in America, he's going to make sure that he's going to throw out brain benders and mind warps and deception. The battle is in the cognitive portion of our mind. That means our thinking. So we have to be very sound in the way that we do research. And, Doug, that's why I fully believe, I see people posting blogs on blogs and on forums and websites, their theories of Jade Helm, and it's like someone would just throw something out there without any proof, without any research, and then other people will hear it and they start echoing the same thing without proof. And that is not intellectual scholarship. That's not being honest. We have to have proof of anything that we throw out there. And I'm going to mention one in a moment, but when we don't have proof, or at least some evidence that points to a valid theory, if we're just pulling things out of the air that have no connection, and then we make a conclusion out of things that don't have any connection, first of all, Doug, it makes us look silly in the alternative media. And so listeners, discipline's important. If we don't do that, then we all look like a bunch of aluminum hat-wearing wackos and weirdos, and that is not our calling to do that. So we have to seek the truth as best we can through proper research. Proper research takes time. It takes discipline. So that's the challenge I need to throw out there. Another thing I want to say...
Nathan, if I can add a kind of a something in context to what you said, okay? When you see these various videos out there and blog postings and forum postings, it just reminds me of something, okay? That and folks, you'll have to think about this. I had seen a rerun of Andy Griffith. Remember that show? The sheriff, Andy Griffith without a gun, is popular back in the late 50s, early 60s primarily. And Barney and Andy Griffith. And in this particular episode, there was I have a point to this, so please bear with me. There was a cow thief, and a farmer called Andy and the sheriff to investigate the theft of a cow. And in the mud outside the barn, there were two sets of footprints. And based on the footprints, it looked like there were two thieves that took this cow. Well, the mayor of the town didn't think Andy and Barney could handle it, and he called in for help from the biggest town nearby. And the guy came out and made plaster casts of the footprints, and based on the footprints, estimated the thieves to be a certain weight and a certain height, and all of this, okay, that one would do in a normal assessment of a crime. And of course, that made Andy, the sheriff, look foolish. Well, to make a long story short, or a half-hour story into 2 minutes here, Andy got the best of them, even with the best of the law enforcement investigative abilities from this one gentleman they brought in. Andy said, "Look, I could tell you right now that I know who it is," and the professional says, you don't know anything." Well, they were at the crime scene looking at the footprints, and of course they made plaster molds and everything. And Andy just looked up at the professional and the mayor, again, both making fun of Andy. And Andy looked up at both of them and said, "What's missing?" And the guys were saying, "What do you mean, what's missing?" He said, "Well, you got two sets of footprints, two guys. The ground is soft, it's muddy. Where are the footprints of the cow?" Now, okay, maybe I didn't tell that story 100% accurately, okay, but you get my drift when I say that people are looking at the footprints of the obvious, but they're missing the even more obvious. But the more obvious may not be visible, okay, and that's kind of the design that I see for Jade Helm. Nathan, I just butchered that, but I think you get the idea, right? That's done well, Doug. And because I don't want to come down too hard on the well-meaning. They just want answers. So in order to find answers, you have to start out with placing everything on the table that you find, and then you start eliminating them one by one. But you cannot place one item on the table and just say, there it is. Right.
Because, again, I mentioned we're going to go into the white paper, Cognitive Joint Force Entry. It is so important to understand that, Doug, a country does not become the most powerful military superpower by accident. They get there by having a lot of information and having the right equipment and having the right brain power behind what they're doing. Jade Helm is not, it doesn't operate just on one guy's invention at the last minute, or someone didn't just throw it out there and say, this is what we're going to do right here. This is the result of several decades of study and of working out the bugs and the bells and the whistles, nuts and bolts, all of that stuff. And as we progress into this conversation, I told you off the air we're going to look at something, and we'll do that in the second hour, the Jade Helm computer program. So anyway, it's so important to maintain our vigilance, trying to understand that deception is a part of what we're seeing. So when we look at Jade Helm, keep that part in mind, ladies and gentlemen. What deception are they trying to get past me? So with that said, Doug, I want to go into the next topic, and that has to do with the video I just made. Now, to begin, I want to point everybody to my website. If you're not there already, on my home page, on the top right, it says show notes, as I often do, Doug. So if you have that ability, ladies and gentlemen, click on that. And what I've done is I've made notes about the video that I just put out yesterday, and it's up on YouTube. The video is there, and the link to the video is at the bottom of this page. But please try to follow along before you watch the video, because the video might distract you from the conversation that Doug and Joe and I are going to have. And
in the address bar, it should say Part 3, watchmanscry.com and so on. This is Part 3, right? Is that correct?
Yes, at the top. When you get to the top, yeah, Part 3. Indeed. Okay. So let's start out with this operation. I always have to say this, Doug, and you know, you live and learn, right? People will take one sentence that you said 6 months ago and take it out of context and then use it against you and say, you said this didn't happen, you're a liar. What's that new term people use, doom porn, or you just like to throw it out there, fear-mongering? So I want to qualify. What we're going to talk about here, ladies and gentlemen, for the record, applies if Jade Helm goes into martial law, if it becomes a live extraction event. That's the standpoint where we're going to talk about this. However, I do believe that it is planting the seeds for what eventually is going to happen here in the United States, where people will get extracted and sent to concentration camp, because that's Bible prophecy. Now,
and there it is. Yes, 100%.
Okay, so,
yeah, don't just to emphasize that. And I'm sorry, Nathan, but just to emphasize that, do not think of this exercise running from July 15th to September 15th. That's when they say that it's running. But understand, this is an open-ended deal. So what Nathan's talking about could be a year from now, could be 18 months from now, could be it could be September. Who knows? But don't pin yourself down to dates. Not you.
For sure,
people.
It'll be data gathering for sure.
Right.
Now, over the past few weeks, as I stated earlier, I've been trying to make sense of this thing. And when I do research, Doug, I don't know, my brain starts asking a lot of questions, and I write them down. And then I try to tackle them one by one. I also say a prayer. I ask God to help me understand. Sometimes I'm prompted, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes the promptings are possibly my own brain working and the gears turning, or sometimes maybe it's a prompting from the Holy Spirit. I don't know, but that's the way my brain works. So in trying to understand Jade Helm, I could never get away from this logo. And at first, if someone at first glance looked at the logo, it seems like there's an empty spot in the middle of the image where you see the arrows. They look broken, and it looks like there's a white glob right in the middle of their logo over the sword or that knife, and then over the arrows. And so some people, without looking further into that, said, well, it means broken arrow, which, by the way, maybe that's one of the layers. Maybe it is, so let's leave it on the table. Maybe they are so smart and ingenious that they came up with a way to illustrate several things. And so I don't want to discount that, but I don't think it's limited to that. So as I looked at the logo, I told myself that I have to look at this in Photoshop. Now, before I go further, though, if you're looking at my notes, you probably saw this, Doug. Most of those who are trying to make sense of this have probably already seen this several days ago. I don't know who broke this or threw it out on the Internet. someone disclosed that the term Jade Helm meant, and they broke down the anagram of Jade and then Helm, and they said Jade meant Joint Assistance for Development and Execution. That's for Jade. And then Helm meant Homeland Eradication of Local Militants. Now, I've noticed, Doug, and I have a chastisement I'm just going to throw out there. And I don't mean to be a jerk when I say it, Doug, but I believe it needs to be said. I noticed that people took just those two statements and they threw them on their websites, they threw them on their blogs and said this is what it meant, and then all the people started commenting. And I noticed this, that the majority of people didn't say, prove it. Show me the document that proves that this is what it meant. Now, on one document I did find where Joint Assistance for Development and Execution proved what it meant, and by the way, I have a link on it. I've been able to confirm that this is true for the word Jade. I have the link here. It's a military document, Joint Assistance for Development and Execution. It's a computer program. We've been able to prove that. Good. Well done. However, Doug, I did notice that people just threw it out there, and they didn't offer a link, and they said this is what it meant, and people ran with it. That is sloppy scholarship. It's not intellectual scholarship and using integrity to follow the truth. So, ladies and gentlemen, whenever you throw out a link or a rumor, and you want to relay or echo something that you hear, use proof, because, again, it serves no purpose to just throw sloppy scholarship. Doug, am I right? It makes us look bad. So now the term Jade Helm, Homeland Eradication of Local Militants. Okay, I saw on one or two websites they had the link for the term Jade, but then for the word Helm, there was no link provided, and people ran with it. And to this day, I have not found any document that says it means Homeland Eradication of Local Militants. If it's out there, ladies and gentlemen, if you have it word for word and you find it in a military document, then please email Doug, email me, email Steve Quell, so that we can prove it. But to just say it and continue echoing it, Doug, to me, it doesn't look good. I have to say that. And by the way, let me ask you gentlemen, have you seen this information that I'm talking about?
I saw it referenced one time, Nathan, and just let me ask you this: Are we not? I mean, when we worked investigations, we'd have briefings or we'd have meetings about the investigations. But aren't we kind of doing this in a sense? You're presenting the evidence that you found, and what we're doing is having like a roundtable discussion and discussing the documentation that you found, and then expanding on it. So, I mean, this is an investigation that's in progress, right? I mean, isn't that kind of what we're doing?
That's what we're doing. And, Doug, one of the biggest frustrations that I get in emails, and I've received hundreds of them, probably by now thousands of them, are from people who say, Nathan, I want to warn my family. I don't know how to do it. Well, the reason some family members probably don't want to believe things they hear is because there's not enough evidence. If a well-meaning person says, hey, husband, read this, look what it says, and they read that Jade Helm means this, as the husband that's doubting reads it, if he doesn't see any proof, he's just going to think, really? What proof do you have? And it continues the circle of individuals who are reinforced that conspiracy theorists are crazy because they don't have any proof. It's just a theory with empty words. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to convince your family members or friends, it's going to take more of a disciplinary, scholarly, rational, intellectual approach with evidence. So when you want to point someone to a website, point them to a website that has links and proof, proof to a military document or some kind of white paper that proves the information, or a video that proves it. And that's another thing, Doug. I get emails from people that say I was driving and I saw a convoy of military vehicles, and I'm just letting you know. And I think to myself, well, where's the pictures? And I have seen a few people sending images or with a smartphone, but I've also seen it appears that the majority will say, I saw them, and so tell everybody. And so the message gets relayed, hey, my Uncle Bill saw a convoy with Russians and Chinese sitting on top of the Bradley fighting vehicles, and we kind of looked at them and they smirked at us, and I'm just letting you know. And they didn't take any pictures. You know, we can go back. One of the I think we've talked about this in the past. I remember when it was real popular, the guillotines had been sighted, the trains with the shackles, and that story kept getting repeated on forums. but no one showed any pictures of them. Not one.
Right.
So, ladies and gentlemen, please, discipline. In order to defeat deception, we have to use the truth. Jesus said the truth sets us free. The light of truth, once you shine the light on it, they will scurry like little rats, but now they've been discovered. So let's use a scholarly approach. I just have to say that, Doug. So moving forward, though, let's talk about the Jade Helm logo. Some of you are probably already ahead of me, but if you can see the picture of the logo that I have on my website, what is that glob in the middle? It's made up of 2 arrows and that sword or knife and then the glob. 3 things. The transparent shoe in the center. And I was researching yesterday, and I found that the Army, the Special Forces, the Green Berets, have their own patch to signify their Special Forces. And do you see that image there? Dio Presso Liber in Latin? That's the Army Special Forces logo, ladies and gentlemen. If you're looking at my website, I have a picture of the Army logo for Special Forces. It has the 2 arrows and the sword.
Mm-hmm.
So they seem to be close. It seems to be the knife seems to be a derivative of that logo. And as I was researching, I found out that knife appears to be the V-42 stiletto that was used in World War II. For those of you that know blades, I have an image of it right here. You see it, Doug?
I do.
The V-42 stiletto knife, that's in the Army logo. So is that the same one in the Jade Helm logo? Well, I noticed that the Jade Helm logo has some changes to it. The arrows are not exactly the same as the Army logo, and the knife looks different, and then you have that glob that's in the middle, in the center of the picture. So I asked myself, what is that? So I took it to Photoshop, and you can see I zoomed in on it. I have a picture here on my website. In the video, it goes pretty quick, but those same images that I used in Photoshop are now here in this study, in this information. So now you can look at it. When I zoomed in, at first, it's hard to make it out. So I tried to change the levels in Photoshop and the contrast, and I still could not make it out. And then I inverted it. I turned it into a negative, and then voila, there it is. The white turned into black. Do you see that, Doug and Joe?
Yep.
Okay. Now, for the people that want to argue and say, because I still got emails from people saying that's not a shoe, Nathan, you're making it up. It's right here. This is the image, reverse. You can do the same thing yourself if you take the Jade Helm image, but in order to really have a scholarly approach of it, I actually dismantled the PDF of the Jade Helm announcement, and I grabbed the image. I didn't just do a screen capture. I got the image, and that's what you see right here. So when you look at the negative image, Doug, do you see, Joe, the notes I placed, the 3 lines and the swirl pattern?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you have that, make note of the 3 lines that I've circled. I have an image, and I've circled some of the markings that are on the shoe. I marked them in this image, and then I also made note of the swirl pattern and also the border of what looks like the area where the buckles would be, but it's painted on. They look like little dots, and then on the inside of the swirl pattern, it looks like a flower or a swirl. With that information, I suspected that it was a wooden shoe. It just looked like one when you really saw it in this shape. And plus, about 20 years ago, I took a trip to Israel, and I made a stop in Holland, and I went to one of those shoe factories, and that's why it came to my memory. So I started searching for wooden shoes, and then there it is. I have the image right under. Do you see the wooden shoe, Doug and Joe?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
When you look at the pattern, the swirl pattern, then the little dots, and then the 3 black lines in front of it, Doug and Joe, based on this evidence right here, it looks very close to the same shoe. And so based on that, I have concluded it is a wooden shoe, a wooden clog from Holland. So here's the big question. Why did they do this? Why did they place a wooden shoe? And, okay, if we are approaching this like detectives, we could ask several questions. This would lead us to a lot more questions. We could ask, well, does Holland have something to do with Jade Helm? Does Amsterdam? Does Europe? Those are valid questions.
Right.
Is Jade Helm involved in Europe? And by the way, for the record, Doug, several years ago, Jade Helm did do an exercise, or not Jade Helm, but the NATO forces did a Jade exercise in the EU in 2 different countries. And I don't have the link for that. After the show's over, I'm going to provide more links, but several years ago they did. But is that where it stops? Is that all that it means? By the way, if you're listening from Europe, the Jade exercises are also going to take place at some point in the future because the software, the Jade computer program, is a part of NATO. I have a link to the NATO website. I'll put it up where NATO talks about it. So is that where it stops is one of the questions. Well, maybe, but I had to do further research, Doug. So by the way, let me also throw this out. I received a few emails from some people who discussed the wooden shoe several weeks ago. They were talking about it on some forums, and someone threw out, well, it means the wooden shoe comes from the word sabat, which is what sabotage comes from, so it means sabotage. And I noticed that one person said it on the forum, and then everyone took that theory, and they ran with it. Well, that's what it means. So they emailed me and said, Nathan, this is what it means. And again, ladies and gentlemen, let's be scholarly in our approach. And let me say this. Perhaps that's part of the meeting. Perhaps sabotage could mean it, but if that's true, then I have to ask this. Why would the U.S. military say that sabotage is going to be a part of the Jade Helm exercise? Usually sabotage is carried out by insurgents and enemies. In the Jade Helm logo, the U.S. military places their tools of choice, their strengths, their weapons. And many of the Army patches that we see in the military patches, they will have lightning bolts and skulls and machine guns, knives, swords, showing the type of weapons that they are. So why would the U.S. military say we are saboteurs? We do sabotage. That doesn't make sense. So we're looking at it backwards from there. We have to look at it from the lens of the military forces, how they will approach dealing with their enemies. So because of that, Doug and Joe, I have to say I'm not so sure about that theory of the sabat shoe because it doesn't fit. So let's go on. I kept seeking the answer, and as you can see, I did a search. I went to Google. I typed in the words Wooden Clogs Prison, and I have a screenshot of the results that I got. You can see it right there. And lo and behold, interesting. It brought up a lot of hits of Holocaust websites, and the websites were either museums or they had images of what took place in the Holocaust, the way prisoners were treated, the clothes that they wore, the camps where they lived. And so I have 3 links right here from Auschwitz.org, the HolocaustExplained.org, and then one from one of the death camps, Mauthausen concentration camp that's located in Austria. I have 3 links there. At your leisure, you can click on that. It'll bring up images and pictures of those death camps. But I grabbed some of the images of the artifacts and the clothing that they wore, and as you scroll down, Doug, do you see the wooden shoes?
Yes.
From Mauthausen concentration camp, the prisoners were given, when they arrived, and when you go to these websites, it says this, when they got off the trains, they had to strip down, and they were given the prison outfits, the striped pajamas, and they had to wear them, and whenever they got to bathe, whether, I believe one website said it was once every 6 weeks they got to bathe, this is what they wore. And some of the prisoners, if they were going to work, were given wooden clogs. Now, not everyone was given wooden clogs. If they were too weak to work, then their days were numbered. They had no use for the work camp, and many of them at arrival were sent to the gas chamber, or they were just allowed to wither away and die. But the people that had to work were given wooden shoes. Now, I don't have a link to this, and I'll place it after the fact, but Doug and Joe, do you remember the ghettos in Poland where they took the Jews and they corralled them into certain areas of the Polish villages, and they surrounded it with fences, and they made them live in there in horrible squalor-like conditions, and they treated them, it was horrible in the ghettos. Well, there is one ghetto located in Poland where 50,000 Jewish citizens lived, and they were surrounded by the fence, and they were mistreated. Before the ghetto uprising, one of them is very famous in Poland, and before the Jews knew that eventually they were going to be sent to the death camps, they lived in the ghettos, and they tried to survive as best as they could. Well, some of the ghettos had factories, and some of the Jewish citizens worked in the factories for pennies. They were slaves, but the owners of these factories, there's one factory in particular, there was a Nazi person who owned several factories inside the ghetto, and so he had contracts with Hitler, and he used his factories where he paid slave wages to the Jewish citizens in the ghetto to create and manufacture Hitler's equipment or clothing or things that would be used later on. And one of these factories had orders for an unlimited supply of wooden shoes. So in this ghetto in Poland, you had thousands of Jewish workers who were creating these wooden shoes, wooden clogs, that would then be used in the Holocaust, in the Nazi concentration death camps for themselves. So in essence, they were making the clogs that a year later they were going to be wearing as they tried to survive and were living in horrible conditions in the future. So isn't it interesting that they made the clothing that would be a part of the end of their lives? That's documented, and so wooden shoes were made because leather was rationed, and wooden shoes were easy to make. If someone tries to ask the question, were clogs? Does it mean Amsterdam or Holland? No, clogs were made during Hitler's Nazi era, and they were given to the prisoners. I have to stress that. So when we look at these images over and over in Auschwitz, in the Mauthausen concentration camp in Austria, and in some of the other ones, there are images here, Doug. It's right here before us. There can be no doubt that wooden clogs are a part of concentration camps and of the Holocaust. Wooden clogs. So, with that said, Doug, with that information, now we have to place on the table, okay, now that we know that this is what they wore when they were in the death camps, in the internment camps, the prisoners, the workers, is that a hint of what's coming to the internment in the future of America and in Europe, in the West, and other parts of the world? Does that mean that wooden shoes are going to once again be worn by detainees? Not necessarily. Well, by the way, clogs are wore, plastic clogs are worn by prisoners today, but they're made out of plastic. That part is true. But I think, Doug, I really believe this. At this point, and I could be wrong, but this is where I am right now in my research. If something else comes forth to point me in a different direction, then I'll go in another direction. But at this point, I see no other reason. I see no reason why we have two arrows and a blade and then the prison clog and the Jade Helm logo. Since we do know, because we saw the images from Florida, since we do know extractions are a part of the operation, since we do know Jade Helm is the end game, it's a practice for the end game eventually for invading dissidents and rounding up dissidents, for doing flash visits, blitz-type attacks, catching dissidents and insurgents and domestic, quote, terrorists off guard. They're going to do it quickly. They're going to show up. Since we do know that that's what this operation is about, then we do know this. Logic has to take us to this conclusion. They will use their weapons. And by the way, I broke this down, and I include this, Doug. The arrow is what the U.S. military uses. Today in modern warfare, the arrow can be represented by weapons from the air, from the sky, which translate into what? Into Predator drones, into missiles, into mortar shells, whatever they are, from the sky. Our U.S. military has arrows. So Jade Helm, they have the arrow right here. So that tells us that if need be, however, whatever the level of containment is applied to the profile that they have to extract, if it's dead or alive type scenario, or if it's just an elimination, assassination type scenario that we see happening in Afghanistan, where the drones just, show up at a wake or at a funeral or at a wedding, then that's what they're going to use. Or they will use the sword. What is the sword in the Bible? The sword translates as a weapon of war. Today in modern warfare, it's a weapon that kills, which in the hand of a warrior is a gun or an assault weapon, a machine gun, whichever toy that the military uses as a weapon to fire bullets to destroy and kill the enemy. That's the other weapon that they're going to use. So the Jade Helm logo has these two images on their logo. If those two images mean and translate into how they're going to deal with the insurgents, then logic also must include, Doug and Joe and ladies and gentlemen, that shoe, the wooden shoe, is also one of the methods that they will use to contain. So based on the level of threats from the person that they have profiled, Doug, the last time I was on the program, we talked about the profiling.
Right.
We talked about infiltration, and we're going to talk about that in the next hour. We're going to talk about some tactics and strategies that we can use to try to fight that. But based on what we know as how the Special Forces will use to deal with the profiles, if they are not a fatal threat and they just need to end up at Guantanamo Bay or maybe the new detention facility in Chicago or any of the numbers of hundreds of ones that are ready. They're offline right now, but they're just waiting. The turnstile's there. It spins. They oiled it. They're waiting. The beds, the mattresses are there. They're ready. The train tracks can arrive there. Then they're going to use the method of detention of a possible work camp. Now, work camps are something that they have talked about, our military. And Doug and Joe, I talked to you earlier about that, and I believe that both of you have read that white paper. Joe, you told me you've read it. It's, 75 pages long, about work camps that are a part of the future of America eventually when martial law happens? Is that a conspiracy theory, or can we prove it with a real document?
Oh, it's a tangible document. You're talking about FM 3.3940, right? Yeah. No, I mean, it's there. It's indisputable. Yeah. Internment and resettlement operations. I mean, how much clearer can that be? And we know, and Alex Jones talks about this, and it seems like everyone that knows anything talks about this. It is for United States citizens because it does mention about Social Security numbers, where to place the numbers on the listing, on the roster of people that are being incarcerated or housed or hosted in these camps. Yeah. So
I will place a link, Doug, to that document. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're taking notes, write this down, and you can search for it yourself. Or right now I don't have the link at the moment, but I'll place a link. It's called FM 3-39.40. The name of it is Internment and Resettlement Operations. It was published on February of 2010, and it's how many pages did you say, Joe? 75 or
75, I think.
No, the internment is 300 plus pages.
Oh, 326. Okay, yeah, I see it right here. Wow.
But yes. The guts there, the maps and all that. Well, go ahead. Yeah, the entirety of the document's over 300 pages, 300 and some pages.
Have you read the whole thing, Joe?
Yes.
Can you give us a summary?
Oh goodness. Well, let's just say it's
very
broken down
detailed,
into different parts. You have parts for commanders, team leaders. Basically, it talks about how to separate, segregate, tag, and filter prisoners, and how they'll transport them, how they'll house them, how they'll be treated, how they'll be classified, whether it be a civilian internee or a enemy combatant. So they make the distinction there and talk about that, there will be all of the above interned in these camps, meaning it's not just going to be the quote-unquote red list people. There's going to be civilian internees or displaced citizens there. And it goes through how these different people will be processed, what they will be allowed to engage in, and one of these programs is religion. And they talk about how they're going to silence prisoners through putting a cloth in their mouth, if for singing or if they're praying, they say. They also go on to say that they're only going to teach the host nation accepted version of each religion, and that less moderate internees are going to become more radicalized because they're not going to accept the watered-down teachings that the host nations are given. Basically, what they're going to do is, how our secular church of Christianity here in America has accepted gay marriage. Well, that will be incorporated into the religion. But it basically, if I had to water it down, it talks about the capturing, the processing, and the processing has several different techniques that they use and ways that they use. They're going to be issued ISB numbers or ISN numbers, international Social Security numbers, and they're going to be given a designation, whether it's going to be released with conditions. They'll be either housed in a working unit or they'll be imprisoned if they're enemy combatants.
And you know what, Nathan? What struck me is the very detail. You talk about attention to detail,
right?
Oh my goodness!
I mean, they have diagrams of planes, of trains, of trucks. They talk about where the shackles will be. They talk about where the people will be sitting. The internees will be sitting, and regardless of whether they're considered an enemy combatant or they're just a displaced civilian internee, they're all going to be treated the same.
I have the document, and wow, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, I will put the link to this. If you struggle trying to talk to loved ones or friends because they dismiss it, point them to this document. I'm going to put the link, or if you can search for it yourself. But you got to read this, Doug. This is wow.
Oh yeah.
And Nathan,
yeah.
I can give you. I don't have it right in front of me here. I'll have to go back to some of my flash drives. But I did segregate very important parts of that document onto Word documents. And I don't have those Word documents with me, but I will email them to you this weekend, where it talks about the religious aspects of it. And this gets into the clergy response teams being a part of the what they call the religious leaders or teachers there. They have to go through some type of extensive screening and other harsh, training processes to kind of re-educate them on how they need to teach the internees. It seems to be like what Larry Grathwold talked about with the Weather Underground and what they planned, a re-education camp for Americans who don't and should not think like Americans anymore.
I want to share something. Do you guys have it in front of you?
I have it right here.
Yep.
In chapter 1, just right off the bat, it divides the two categories. One of them is CI, civilian internee, or EPW, enemy prisoner of war, and then it says internment operations focus on all types of detainees and U.S. military prisoners. Although a part of internment operations, we use the term confinement rather than internment when referring to U.S. military prisoners. Confinement, gentlemen, that's the word of choice. You're confined. So it breaks up, and it says some people will be confined and then some will be resettled based on how bad they were. But then it goes on to say, okay, down here, oh, man, this is where it says principles. Military police units are specifically organized and trained to perform a variety of missions across the range of IR operations. They're trained. That's what Jade Helm is doing. They're training to do this. While all military police units have an ability to perform IR operations, these identified as IR organizations are specifically focused and trained to perform all missions associated with this police function. Okay, and then it goes down. There was a count. It breaks down. It categorizes having close contact with the prisoners, how to care, control them, accountability, segregation, minimum force, and then it talks about detainees. Oh, this is real interesting right here. A detainee. This is, for those of you that wonder how you will be labeled, here's one of the ways. It's a term used to refer to any person who is captured or otherwise detained by an armed force. Detainees may also include enemy combatants or enemy prisoners of war and members of armed groups. RP and CIs, detainees do not include personnel being held for law enforcement purposes. And then it goes in to say what a CI is, a civilian, is a civilian who was interned during armed conflict, occupation, or other military operation for security reasons. So if they determine that the many groups out there that are ready have been profiled, Doug and Joe, and how long is the list now of potential domestic, quote-unquote, terrorists? If they are labeled that, it says that they will be detained for military operations for security reasons, or for protection, or because he or she committed an offense against the detaining power. Now, what does that mean, an offense? Is that up to determination or on the weather? Okay, moving on, it says, unless they have committed acts for which they are considered unlawful combatants, generally the civilians qualify for protected status according to this document. So it goes into what a detainee is versus an enemy prisoner of war. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. They have already, they've spelled it out. Enemy combatants. Moving down. Look at this in Chapter 1, page 18, Doug and Joe, Section 115. You see that right there?
Right.
Doug, can you share that part? An enemy combatant is in general what it says right there?
Okay.
This is crazy.
Just to be clear, hang on a minute here. Let me just I just slipped my PDF. Are you're talking about Chapter 115 or?
Yes, where it says enemy combatants.
Okay, hold on just 1 second here because.
Folks, you got to hear this.
Sorry, I'm okay. An enemy An enemy combatant is, in general, a person engaged in hostilities against the United States or its coalition partners during an armed conflict. Enemy combatants includes EPWs and members of
enemy
armed
prisoner
groups.
of war.
Right. And they're divided. You want me to continue? Or
sure.
Okay. They're divided as follows. An enemy prisoner of war is a detained person who, I'll just leave it at that, member of an armed group, and this is important, is a person who engages in or supports acts against the United States or its, now listen to this, or its multinational partners in violation of the laws and customs of war during an armed conflict that do not meet the criteria of a prisoner of war as defined within the Geneva Convention relative to the treatments of the prisoners of war. So that's basically an all-inclusive...
and it talks about the United Nations and other NGOs being in charge of and responsible for some of these. And also, Nathan, in Section 4-33, it goes into detainee processing techniques. And it says soldiers must be process detainees using the 5S technique: search, silence, segregate, speed, and safeguard. Under silence, it says prevent detainees from communicating with one another or making audible clamor such as chanting, singing, or praying. Silence uncooperative detainees by muffling them with a soft, clean cloth tied around their mouths or fastened at the back of their heads. Do not use duct tapes or adhesives. Place a cloth or either objects inside the mouth or apply physical force to silence detainees. And that's just one method of processing. And, I mean, I've read this document at least twice, and it's been a year or so since the last time I read it. And it is so nefarious. It is as bad as you'd imagine. It's much worse than what we've just read at face value.
I just want to caution people. There are sites out there, and they look very legitimate, and they are legitimate, but they're saying this is a hoax. It's been debunked. No. It's not for American citizens.
It's the Department of the Army, and it is for the American citizens because it talks about.
No, I get that.
United States citizens who have Social Security numbers will be issued new numbers. So only United States citizens have Social Security numbers. So if it wasn't pertaining to American citizens, the words Social Security numbers would not be included in here.
Right, but what a lot of sites are saying is because it was never classified, it was never hidden from public view, that we should make less of it. In other words, this is not something that represents a threat to the American public. That's their rationale behind that, and it's a pretty convoluted way of thinking. But please understand that that they're making light of this. Just so you know.
Doug, I want to also include, there are many Patrick Henrys out there and members of the Sons of Liberty, just in case. And there are several states that actually in their state constitution have it written, and Idaho is one of them, and it says every male member, actually I'm not sure if it says male member, but it says every adult over the age of 18 is automatically, by default, a member of the Idaho militia. And I believe other states may have similar writing. So by default, if you live in Idaho, you're a member of the militia. So there are some militia groups who lawfully do train just in case. Now, I'm not saying that they are training just to overthrow the government. So those of you in the boiler room located in Utah, if you're listening to this, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if the Russians cross the Canadian border or China, or if forces that at one time were protecting the Constitution become domestic terrorists against the Constitution, foreign and domestic. That's in the Constitution. So I'm not causing a revolt right here or supporting a revolt. This is my disclaimer. Those individuals should, by law, they lawfully can train just in case. Now, right here in this document, on page 18, it says enemy prisoners of war are persons defined as members of the armed forces of a party to the conflict. And, now watch this, Doug, prisoners of war, they're also members of militias or volunteer corps forming part of such armed forces. So according to this document, militia members are automatically going to be considered prisoners of war when this thing goes live. So just for the record, it's out there, it's on paper. And, Doug, I don't know what sort of brass military member, whoever wrote this, just by this very nature, if it applies to America, is unconstitutional because the Constitution does talk about a well-armed militia. So right here they're saying militia members are enemies. They're right. Political enemies. So this is messed up. But that's where we are. And if we understand, again, I know I keep talking about it, Bible prophecy says that it's eventually the beast is going to rise up, the New World Order, the one world government, is going to rise up and turn on its citizens and become an enemy to all citizens and declare that citizens that do not comply with the new way of thinking, with the plantation earth, will be done away with. And right there, that falls in line with what we see as the Deagle website that states that a lot of Americans are going to be done away with if those numbers are true, the majority of the population, which, by the way, got revised recently.
Yes.
To some crazy number. I don't even remember what it is. Did you read that revision that just came out?
Yes. Yeah, but don't put me in a spot to try to recall it at the moment. Yes, I did. I read it and was surprised.
It's over 200 million that are going to be gone.
Ridiculous.
Some crazy number.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is where we are, ladies and gentlemen. This is what time it is. Again, I'm not saying Jade Helm is going to go live and start detaining everybody, but Jade Helm is a practice session for the future of when this thing does go live. Because eventually, if the Bible's true, it will go live. There is no way that the New World Order beast will rise up and do what it's going to do without going live. It has to happen. So that's an indicator of what time it is. Speaking of time, I see we're at the top of the hour, Doug, so I'll stop there.
All right. And Nathan, you've done a very good job. And folks, and Nathan, before I go on, you know, I was looking at that logo, and you did a fantastic job with your video. Out of all the things that they could have done with that particular logo, you've got to ask yourself, why that shoe? And you know, you're right. You really got me thinking about that, because I looked at that and I thought, you know, that's kind of out of place. To me, that's out of place, out of context, given the armaments. And then you've got this this hazy, translucent clog, if you will, in the center. And we know that symbols mean things, especially to these freaks that are running the show, these Satanists that are running the show. So you have to put it in I mean, this is to me, this is part of a clue in what we're doing here. You know, and folks, pull up your chairs, come to the table, and let's all just discuss this. This is what we're doing. We're discussing this and kind of taking this apart, looking at it. Nathan has done a great job of research and investigation. He's making a presentation to all of us. And this is really an investigative debriefing. And I think it's just fantastic that we're able to do this in this manner with the facts. And I say that, emphasize the word facts that Nathan is bringing to the table, along with some reasonable supposition based on factual documentation. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report this Friday, the 24th day of April 2015. Very good friend of the program, very special guest, Mr. Nathan Leal, Watchman's Cry. Visit his website, bookmark it.
2 hours down, 1 to go, talking about Jade Helm 15, what it means, the logos, the innuendos, the training, the troops. We'll be right back for our third and final hour. Stay with us.
Now, please hear me. This is very important. The ultimate power in the United States of America is believing Christians who know their God. And the balance of power can be changed, not on the basis of a numerical majority and not on the basis of economic might or military might or media monopoly or scientific mind control or anything else. The balance of power in the United States right now, the only power sufficient to redirect the perfect storm is the remnant of believing Christians crying out together in repentance and getting really serious with the living God and going into his throne room with a violence. For the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. What does that mean? Cut the wimpy, disgusting, putrid, impotent, pharisaical, religious game playing that Jesus Christ said to the Laodicean church in the book of Revelation, I will vomit you out of my mouth. I will puke you out of my mouth, because you are neither hot nor cold. Impotent is what Christ was saying. You're useless is what Christ was saying. But he didn't write them off. He gave them one last chance. He asked them to repent. He asked them to receive the eye salve of the Holy Spirit so their vision could be restored and they could see the true nature of what was happening all around them. And he called them. Jesus Christ called them. He said he was going to clothe them. Notice the words clothe them, as he set them on fire, because they would only be useful to the degree they stopped being cold or hot and were set on fire. So in a very brief summary here, I want to ask every single person listening, I want to ask you this question as your brother in Christ. Certainly no better than any of you, and most likely worse in the flesh than all of you. I ask you this. Can you say before God that you have taken responsibility for the perfect storm that is about to destroy this nation on a level that is too horrific to describe? Have you taken ownership of it? Or are you playing games? Are you dancing around the golden calf? Is that what you're doing, dancing around the golden calf? Because I'm telling you right now, all hell's about ready to break loose. And if you can't see it, it's because you're too busy looking at the golden calf.
Folks, I just want to, looking at the email here, I would just want to say thank you to Jennifer T., who sent some images, World War II Museum, Dachau and Auschwitz prison camp images. Very sobering when it comes to the concentration camp display, shoes, identification stamps, prisoner uniforms. Also, Jackie, thank you so much for your contribution. Denise, boy, excuse me for that. Denise writes a great article. Denise will be, give me time, I'll be addressing that. Off air. A lot of people, by the way, have military people in their family in the military, and that's kind of the crux of Denise's email. You know, and it's difficult to really, honestly, advise them as to what to do or to give them advice. You know, with you've got family in the military, it's a very hostile environment for Christians right now, and it's certainly some of the nations where people are being deployed are hostile to Christians inherently. So, and the other thing I want to say, two other things. I just want to welcome all of our new listeners again from all the way from Kazakhstan and Barcelona, Spain, Wales, UK. Thank you so much for listening. The other issue, folks, if you haven't done so already, Paul McGuire's book, Mass Awakening, fantastic. And Susan, what a great job you've done. The Art Doctor, what a great job you've done as well. And folks, if you haven't done so already, visit American Survival Wholesale. Visit Casper Bed. Man, if you haven't taken advantage of Casper, Casper.com/CFP Radio. If you have not taken advantage of that, please do so. Pro Flowers as well. All of our sponsors, Pro Flowers. Oh, make someone's day. Guys, make someone's day. Moms, daughters, sisters, wives. You can do it. Pro Flowers, fantastic. And the same goes for Honest to Goodness Toffee. Man, what a gourmet delicacy. Fantastic. And Nature Box. Don't forget Nature Box. And to bring it all together, Blue Apron. What a great service, Blue Apron. They're all available, or all accessible via our website. That's HagmanandHagmann.com. And while you're there, don't forget to visit all of our partners as we try to dissect the truth, what's really happening, and that includes Watchman's Cry. Nathan Leal, our guest for today.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our third and final hour this Friday, April 24th, 2015. Our guest, as my dad just said, Nathan Leal from Watchman'sCry.com. That's Watchman'sCry.com. Bookmark his website, not only for appearances on our show and other shows, but he has a great collection of audio sermons, very inspirational messages. I just love to sit back and listen when I get time. The last one I listened to was his Overcomer series, and that was very uplifting and timely for me.
I just got an email from Rob from your state, Nathan, Idaho, who says, "Boy, Doug, did you butcher that Andy Griffith story?" Which I forgot to say, Doug, is that the cow thief put the shoes on the cow, suggesting, of course, on the 4 feet of the cow, suggesting 2 cow thieves instead of 1 cow thief. But you got the rest right. At least you got that much right. So anyway, thank you, Rob, for that. All right, brother. Well, it's great to have you back, and it's really great. Folks, pull up a chair around this conference table and this investigative debriefing by Mr. Nathan Leal. Nathan, go ahead and take it away, sir.
Okay, in the third hour, gentlemen, we're going to take a ride. So I want ask everybody to fasten their seatbelt, because we're going to look at some things that I'm not sure if they have been talked about or spoken, but we're going to talk about them here, about the Jade computer program, and also the white paper, Cognitive Joint Force Entry. I keep referencing that, and I want to just start out with that, Doug. By the way, do you have that with you?
Yes.
That paper?
Yes. Yeah, the one that you had talked about.
The Cognitive Joint Force white paper.
Yep.
I cannot stress enough, Doug, the disclosure that's in this paper, because it really reveals entirely their motives and their strategy and how they plan to carry out this entire operation. What they basically say right here is, in order for them to win in the human domain, the war, the battle, and the victory is going to take place in the minds of the people. They're going to conquer the people in their mind. And ladies and gentlemen, if they're telling us this, that goes along with Scripture, because the Bible says there will be a great deception. So we can't get away from this, Doug. They have invested how many billions or trillions of dollars studying the brains? They've been at this for 100 years almost now. Tavistock, the Rand Corporation, they have made a science out of studying the reactions of people and how to steer and corral people and to convince people that, or to make them think they're arriving at the conclusion on their own, when really they were steered there by very clever, crafty weapons and tools that the people didn't even notice. So when it comes to the coming police state and martial law, we do have the awake ones, and God bless those of you that are awake, ladies and gentlemen. There are many of you that are smart. Wherever you may live, whatever your occupation is, even in the armed forces, I want to just give a great shout-out. I thank you for your service, and I'm thankful, Doug. They're our last line of defense, really. And also this includes oath keepers, those in law enforcement, those involved in the political arena that are awake and who know what's going on. Those are the ones that are going to stir up and cause the problems to be here, because the Bible does tell us that even till the very end, not everyone's going to go along with it. There will be a portion of the population that says, I don't think so. No way. So those ones that are going to say, I don't think so, are the ones that are waking up now. People that aren't awake are going to go along with it, and unfortunately, the majority do fit that criteria, that profile. But here in this white paper, it tells us, it says, by its very name, Doug, if you break down Cognitive Joint Force Entry, if you break it down and you circle the word cognitive and joint, two separate words, and then force entry is another one. In the past, when the military would go into a theater, they would enter forcibly. That's their job, special operations. Therefore, they forcefully enter, and they go in to win. They have it planned out, and then they leave, and they do what they're supposed to do. Well, now the U.S. military has figured out that they have to join forces with new types of tactics and tools and weapons and strategies, which this paper tells us. They will join forces with the cognitive weapon. So Cognitive Joint Force Entry. The brains are joining with the forces that enter. So cognitive, the brain power, which means deception, propaganda, and all of those things that we talk about, Doug and Joe, the things that people sneer at and laugh at and make fun of when we talk about them, that's the cognitive disassociation that most people fall into. They can't handle their little world of make-believe and pretend not being what they think it is. They want to believe in Neverland, Neverland, and Peter Pan, and in the cartoon world of the reality shows and American Idol, where everything is great. The government would never hurt you. They would never experiment on you. And as long as you have nothing to hide, what do you care if our freedoms are being erased? You know, Doug, that response, that when people say that, reveals that they're not really using their brain power. When they say, what is there to hide? Well, if they're spying on us, I have nothing to hide, so I don't care. That right there, Doug, is a... What do you think when you hear people say that?
It's sad. But you know what? I have to say this. was one of those people. That a dozen years ago, I often said, well, it doesn't matter to me because I don't have anything to hide. Well, that may be true, but until you understand the bigger picture and the delusion that you're speaking of, Nathan, and until you have a good understanding of the Bible prophecy, as well as the intent of the globalists, then once you have the entire picture and have a good intellectual, mature understanding of what's happening, you're not going to. I mean that to me. People who say that have not matured in the spirit or intellectually, I believe.
If a person is a Christian, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, you're a new-time listener and you're struggling with waking up, maybe you're in the process of it, you're seeing things that don't make sense, let me just say this. If you believe the Bible's true, and if you're a Christian, I'm pretty sure you do, even if you're not awake, you believe in the end times, we have to acknowledge and place on the table that at some point in time, deception will be the law of the day. It will rule the day. It's going to trick a lot of people into taking the mark. If we take that piece of information and we work backwards, then we have to admit and acknowledge that at some point that deception is going to kick in. And that's one thing that a lot of Christians don't think about. They, for those that believe in the pre-tribulation rapture, and I don't want to digress into that, but for those that believe in the pre-trib rapture, most of them who are well-meaning do not really consider and wonder if the morphing process of deception will take place before the quote-unquote pre-tribulation rapture happens. But if the rapture were to happen tomorrow, the next day, according to the Bible, according to the pre-rapture theory, the beast rises up and takes over the world with deception. Well, if it takes over with deception, then we have to logically say that, well, the infrastructure and the framework had to be in construction the day before and weeks before and months and years before it rose up, meaning that at some point in the future this beast is going to rise up with deception. That means the infrastructure is in right now. It's been the welders are working on it right now, Doug. The hood is open. They're turning the screws and the bolts, and they're getting this thing refined and figured out. So that deception is happening now, ladies and gentlemen. So that's why right now we have to start being very vigilant when we hear things, when we hear news reports, when we see legislation, when we see politicians sitting on their hands and doing things that make no sense. It's because they're under the spell of deception. There will be a spell that does this. Now, in this white paper, on page 1, Doug, it says that their method provides a framework right there. That's the framework. That's the infrastructure. It says that they're going to have a framework, meaning they're going to have it all built. They're going to have it all the pieces welded together, and the computers will exist, and all the Einsteins will have figured out how to make this thing be successful. They will have a framework to inform and influence the activities of whatever the campaign is that they're going to go into. It says their campaigns will be shaped by them by, number one, inform and influence activities. That means that they're going to inform the population information. They're going to throw out information. They're going to bait the population with red herrings or a false story or propaganda or fiction that will shape the atmosphere or the region. And it also says that they will influence the people. It's an activity to inform and influence. So now that we're looking at Jade Helm is also an influence and informing activity. So when we see all the responses that are taking place and a lot of people are getting upset, the Houston Chronicle, I couldn't believe it, Doug. The Houston Chronicle posted a story about the Walmart's closing, how it's suspicious, and they even linked to some of the alternative websites. So now some of the mainstream media is asking the question, what's up? But because of that, Doug, I have to also include that I believe that part of the rationale of Jade Helm, or part of the strategy of Jade Helm by the framers of Jade Helm, is to throw in a bomb of chaos and confusion and to see what people are going to do with it. I really believe that, and I believe that they are going to tally and data mine the public response so that then they can use it in their favor in the future. But that's the number one thing that Jade, Helm, and that the future operations will do. They will inform and influence. Another thing that this paper says that they will do, it says that the cyber domain, meaning the Internet, offers several advantages over other forms of warfare for the enemy. For the people that they want to conquer, the cyber domain is giving the insurgents an advantage. Therefore, they have to acknowledge this. They have to acknowledge that there's an alternative media. They have to acknowledge that you exist and that I exist. That there are people that are trying to wake up the masses. They have to acknowledge that, so they're going to use that information right there to be able to twist what we are doing, Doug, by misinformation or confusion or by trolls or by shills. There's a lot of ways that they're going to use to try to turn it around. Now, that's one reason that I believe that net neutrality just passed, because that's going to play a role in the future. Net neutrality, over and over, I scanned the entire document. It was a chore. Took a few hours. And over, Doug, it said lawful content. It kept making reference to lawful content versus unlawful. So at some point, if what we're doing is labeled as unlawful, then they're going to pull the plug, or they will minimize the search results. They have ways of steering traffic away from us, and at some point they're going to use it in their favor. So that they're going to use the Internet. The information war is going to be a part of their campaign. Another thing that they're going to do, and this is also on page 1, it says they need to identify the proliferation of information that's out there. And they have to see it as an irregular warfare tactic and a potential challenge for them, meaning the information, the websites, the disclosures, the exposures we're doing, the pictures of the convoys, Jade, Helm, people, the homemade journalists, the people on the ground with their smartphones that are reporting on blogs, Facebook, social media, etc. They have to acknowledge that it's a challenge for them, but the paper goes on to say, therefore, they need to see how they could benefit by using this and turning it around. So how could they use what we're doing as a benefit to them? Well, they could cause the information environment to be confused, and they can throw misinformation in the midst of good information. And also, watch this, Doug, because well-meaning militia members are wondering if this thing's going to go live, I'm getting emails already from, as I stated earlier, those that can't wait to pull the trigger. There are some people that can't wait. So is it possible that some provocateurs could be strategically placed by the powers that be, and they could get this thing started and blame it on militia members or patriot members? I believe so. And I want to reference the prophetic dream that I had several years ago, and I shared it on your show, where I saw an ambush take place where several MRAPs showed up in a small city. It was a 4-lane highway in a downtown, a 4-lane street in a downtown area in some city of America, and several MRAP vehicles showed up, and the SWAT team got out, and they were going to serve one of the buildings. It was in a downtown area. The buildings were about 4 stories tall, and when they all got out of their vehicles, instantly from the rooftops on both sides of the street, patriots started firing on the SWAT members and mowed them all down. And in this dream, I started screaming, no, stop. Do you see what you've done? And in my dream, I was screaming, I was yelling, I was crying, because I knew that at that point, America was going to change. At that point, it was going to change all the rules, and martial law would then go to the next level. And I saw this in a prophetic glimpse, Doug. So at some point, there will be, whether it's provocateurs or well-meaning people who are trigger-happy, who have been deceived by Satan, by spiritual forces, at some point, someone's going to do the unthinkable and fire upon our law enforcement, whether they're SWAT team members or military members. They're going to do it, Doug. It could be provocateurs or otherwise. I don't know, but it's going to happen, and that's going to take it to the next level. The next dream that I saw, for those of you that might not have remembered, or to remind you, that dream instantly changed to where I was then in a location in the state of Arizona, and I stated that back then. I was in a motel room looking out the window at a road, and there were thousands of patriots, militia members who were armed, marching on a street, 4 lanes across, 2 in each direction. Thousands of them were marching on the street across the hotel parking lot or a motel parking lot, traveling to the west. And I went out into the parking lot and I begged them not to do it because they were off to war, and I knew that they were going to be killed. I just knew in my dream, in the spirit, they were not going to make it. Now, this is the other thing that has to be stated, ladies and gentlemen. I believe that there are certain rules of engagement that we as freedom-loving Americans and constitutionalists must keep in mind to contain ourselves. Number one, I believe that self-defense is necessary if everything went to Hades and the lights went out and anarchy took over and there were bandits on the road. You need to protect your family and the innocent. So the rules of engagement would apply. Using wisdom, it would apply then. They would also apply when invading forces come across the border from Canada and Mexico, or both coasts, Chinese and Russian soldiers. You better believe I fully support militia people facing them. I believe it, Doug. This is our land.
It's our responsibility.
It's our responsibility.
It's our moral and biblical responsibility for if we cannot protect our family, then we're no better than the infidel. That's I believe, and Pastor Langford makes that clear. And yes, absolutely.
Okay, now let me say this though: the thing that I struggle with, Doug, whether or not they're right or wrong, I still struggle with this because I believe when the time comes where the National Guard is told, hey, there's enemy combatants, enemy insurgents in America, go grab them. Many of those soldiers are going to be struggling and wrestling with their conscience, and at first maybe they'll go along with it. Eventually maybe they'll lay down their weapons and say, I can't do this anymore. There's going to be an inner struggle where they will change sides, and when the New World Order beast tries to take over, we're going to see inner conflict happen. We will also see inner conflict happen with our military forces if they are told that they need to fire on U.S. citizens or contain or use military means to deal with American citizens. There's going to be a conflict going. I know this, Doug. I've spoken to those that are enlisted. They don't know what to do. They're scared. So when that happens, Doug, I struggle with just the blanket answer saying the minute the military wants to be behind martial law, just start ambushing them, start shooting at them. I struggle with that because those are our fellow brethren. Some of them are Christians. Some of them may turn in the future. Some of them may do heroic acts. So I don't think it's cut and dry. So fighting against the New World Order, which, by the way, when it does happen, the New World Order will need the U.S. military to contain Americans. There's no other way it can happen, or it may be this. Maybe it will happen where the U.S. military is offshore and blue helmets will come in. Now, if that's the case, I don't have a problem. I hope that I'm explaining the struggle here because I think if anyone is normal and well-meaning, they understand where I'm coming from. So that being said, there is going to be a battle in the mind that is going to take place where it's not cut and dry. You know, what do you do? Those are our boys, and they're just following orders. What do you do? This is why we'll need the mind of Christ and the counsel of God, ladies and gentlemen. It's not simple. And this is also where the mind of Christ and the wisdom of God and the protection of God, Psalms 91, the Holy Spirit, will be there to help us make the right decisions, to help us stay one step ahead of opposing forces so that we will not, hopefully, not have to make wrong decisions. So that's why we need to include God in this equation. Now, Doug, I don't want to spend too much time with this thing, but I just need to say that it's going to be a mind bender. Cognitive weapons, they know how to throw out ethics, situation ethics where the people don't know what to do. They know how to form the narrative that labels innocent people who are God-fearing as domestic terrorists. They know how to form the correct story that labels militia members and Patriot Group members as domestic enemies of the state, so that the rest of the neighborhood will just say, oh, okay, they got labeled. Well, in that case, I'll turn off my brain and go along with it. I guess they deserve to be in an orange jumpsuit. So it's going to be the brain that's the battle of the mind that's going to win this thing for them. The enemy is going to use this. So, ladies and gentlemen, we need the mind of Christ. And I put out a paper recently, an article, Jade Helm Part 2. It's on my website. It's under my video. And it goes into the question of infiltration, Doug. And it asks a lot of questions. It asks, how does a freedom-loving group, no matter what they're labeled as, whether they're militia, Patriot Group, how do these type of groups try to be vigilant against infiltration? Because as we look forward into the coming New World Order and the rise of the beast, the Bible tells us that we'll be delivered up, we'll be betrayed. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are a part of a group that meets right now, you need to be thinking out loud. Read my document, Part 2, and take the advice that I place in there. Doug, if a group has met and there's a shady person who just doesn't sit well, if the group relies on the counsel of God and the wisdom of the Holy Spirit, then they have to privately meet with mature members of the group who depend on the mind of Christ, who are mature in their walk with Christ, and they have to ask the question, is it possible we've been infiltrated? And then they have to take the matter to prayer, they have to fast, and they have to come to terms with asking God if they've been infiltrated. In the future underground church that's coming, we will need to use these tactics where the Holy Spirit helps us to know if we've been infiltrated or if there's a possible mole or spy that will want to join our groups. The first century church dealt with this on a regular basis. The underground church had to deal with persecution. They met in catacombs. They met in secret places, and they had to figure out a way how not to be infiltrated so that all of them wouldn't be killed. So the wisdom that the first century church lived with is going to be the strategy that we're going to have to get a hold of now, Doug. We have to start doing it now. I'm thinking about it now. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I want to suggest this. Start studying the church that had to endure the Soviet communist era in the last century, whether it was in China or North Korea or the Soviet Union. Many of the Christians who endured the Soviet Union would meet. I heard these stories when I attended Bible college, Doug. We had people who were refugees out of communist Poland and Russia, and they had escaped, and they came and spoke at my Bible college, and they told us what they had to deal with. And I heard stories that were horrible. But at the same time, I heard stories where they had to learn a tactic where they depended on the Holy Spirit. They learned a discipline that is a stranger to us here in America and to most Western Christians. They had to learn a discipline that relied on the Holy Ghost, the secret voice, the still small voice of the Holy Spirit. They learned how to hear it. And these Christians would hear, hey, you need to leave now, or tomorrow they're coming, or don't go here, don't go there. That's how they lived. And many of these Christians, I heard stories where they would actually have hatches in their houses where their crawl spaces were only 3 to 4 feet high under their houses, and they would Christians would meet, 20, 30, 40 Christians would go in the crawl space, and they would worship in a crawl space. That's how they had to deal with it. And also, these Christians learned the mind, the condition of the mental conditioning where they knew at any given time they could die. They could be arrested tomorrow or in 3 days, because they lived with the reality that often their house church pastors would disappear and you never heard from them again, or so-and-so would disappear and they were sent to Siberia, the Gulag, and they were sent for several years in prison. But they had come to terms with it. Doug, they were able, the Bible tells us they loved their lives not unto death. They got to the point where they thought different than we think here in America. And ladies and gentlemen, I know what I'm saying is scary. It's scary, and a lot of people say I can't deal with it, but the Bible tells us why. It tells us the remedy. They love not their lives unto death. so we have to get to a new place in our walk with God where we have to be able to say our lives are temporary. We have to make heaven and the eternal perspective more of a focus, because right now it's not a challenge, but in the future we have to get to the point, Doug, where we have to be able to embrace the possibility of our mortality, and we have to be able to accept that, hey, if I die tomorrow, I can deal with it. I'm okay with it. We have to get to that point, Doug. What does it take to get there? It's a struggle. It's a journey. It's a lot of tears. There's a lot of grief. There's fear to overcome. But, ladies and gentlemen, we have to start working on getting there now before this thing hits, because otherwise those that fall into the lie of deception, when we really think about it, Doug and Joe, those that betray one another and turn in their neighbors, the only reason they do it is because they want to save their own hide, because they want to preserve their life. So then they betray others. But the secret underground Soviet church, when they were met with the challenge, hey, tell us the members of your church, give us the names, they said, or what? Or we're going to kill you. And they said, okay, you're going to threaten me with heaven or what? And they were okay with that. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have to get to that point where we see heaven differently. We have to overcome that fear. Several years ago, my mother had a dream. I don't know if I've shared this on this program. I might have a few years ago, Doug. She had a dream where she was in the tribulation, and they were threatening her. They said, tell us the names of the others in your group. And she said, no, I'm not going to do it. You can kill me, that's fine. She was okay with that. But then they brought in my nephew, who at the time was about 5 or 6 years old, and they had him in front of her, and they had a gun to his head, and they said, tell us or we're going to shoot him. Mm. And my mother, in the dream, she said she couldn't believe it, because when she woke up she was weeping, but in the dream it just came right out. This was the wisdom of God. My mother looked at my nephew and said to him, eye to eye, "Hun, it's only going to hurt for a little bit."
Wow. Think about that.
That's where we need to get, Doug. How do we get there, though? We have to get to the point where we love not our lives, even unto death. I know that's not easy. I heard the stories of what Al-Shabaab did. They massacred more Kenyans, and one by one, are you a Muslim or a Christian? I'm a Christian. Bam, they shot him. And one by one, the Christians lined up, and they bravely said, I am a Christian, and Jesus is my Savior. I'm not a Muslim. They knew they were going to die, but they did it. How could they do that, ladies and gentlemen? How could they do it so bravely? I know that there are Christians that are fearful, and they say, I don't know if I could do that. I really don't know if I could pull that off. But I want to encourage you with this, ladies and gentlemen. If you can, buy the book, Fox's Book of Martyrs. Buy it from Amazon. Get a hold of that book and read the testimony of what the martyrs went through in the early church. And over, there are stories and accounts of martyrs who were burned at the stake. And I got to share this one, Doug. The martyrs had an agreement with one another, and they said, because they knew at any given time the Inquisition was taking place, their doors could be kicked in, and the soldiers could come in and threaten them with death. And even the martyrs then, the early church, they didn't know if they could pull it off. So this is what they agreed with one another, because the penalty then wasn't a bullet to the head. It was burning at the stake, which is a slow death. Who wants to do that? So the martyrs, they agreed with one another, and they said, okay, if any one of us is arrested and that we're taken to the courtyard in the city square and we're burned at the stake, let's come up with a way of signaling each other that God's grace is sufficient, that God is there with us. Let's somehow tell each other that it's okay. This will be the signal. If they haven't tied your arms down, lift your hands while you're on fire.
And you know what, Nathan? Thank you for saying this. Just let me add this, ladies and gentlemen. When you read and you see and you're faced with all of the Jade Helm, for example, information out there, all of this, regardless of how it's presented, are we not lacking the spiritual component of the assessment and also the blowback that Nathan Leal is talking. That's why this is so important. Nathan, thank you for bringing this out. I think this is so important to add this spiritual, godly component to what we're going through, because you're not going to find it very few places will you find it.
Thank you, Doug. Well, the accounts tell us, and again, ladies and gentlemen, get that book. Everyone listening, buy that book. The accounts tell us that while they lit the torch, are you going to renounce your Protestant religion? They said no. So they lit the torch, the embers, the brush that was at their feet, and while their skin was melting off. Now, this is incredible, Doug and Joe. This is what the accounts say. While their skin was melting off, the account tells us that several times they lifted up their hands while their flesh was on fire and just held their hands up as they perished. Oh. Meaning that somehow God's grace was sufficient for them. Now, does that mean they didn't feel pain? I don't know what it meant, but they were communicating that, hey, God's here with me. Maybe they were surrounded by angels. Maybe they could see the angels. Maybe they saw Jesus in front of them, smiling at them, saying it'll only hurt for a little bit. We can do it. Ladies and gentlemen, God's grace is sufficient. A few days ago, I had a brief prophetic glimpse, and in this prophetic glimpse, I believe I was in the aftermath of the police state, because I was talking to a fellow watchman, and he's been a guest on your show, and I won't say his name because he didn't give me permission, but in this dream, he didn't look the same way he usually does. His hair had grown out. He had a scraggly beard. He was wearing clothes that you would wear if you were hunting. And in the dream, he had been having Bible studies in an old abandoned warehouse on Friday nights. The underground church would meet. And so in the dream, I met him, and I said, well, today's the day you meet, right? And he said, yeah, today we're taking a day off, but this is where we meet. He looked different, Doug. It was a survival type atmosphere. And as I was talking to him, I looked at him and I saw, he looked like John the Baptist. He was scraggly. And I said to him, you look like you're either ready to preach or ready to look through a scope. And what I meant by that was, protect yourself. And he looked at me and he said, see, you understand. That's what he said to me. So wow. He was wearing two hats. The revolution, I guess, had begun. And while he was saying, see, you understand, I looked out the window, and I saw a bald eagle flying through the air from the west toward the east, and it was gliding. His wings were not moving. He was going pretty slow in a slow glide at a 45-degree angle toward the ground, and there was a trail of smoke coming out behind the bald eagle, kind of like you would see a Japanese Zero that had got shot and it was going to crash, the trail of black smoke. The bald eagle had a trail of black smoke coming out the back. It was going to crash. So this was the end of America, the glimpse that I saw. And Doug and Joe, this part cannot be dismissed. We're going to eventually get there, where the freedoms, the spiritual freedoms that we're used to right now, are going to have to go underground. And yes, it's going to take the determination of those of you listening, ladies and gentlemen, to come to terms with that. We can't just give up to the beast, but I just want to encourage you, God can be there. He knows that this is going to happen. I read Daniel chapter 12 at the beginning of this interview. Many would be purged and refined. That's when it happens, Doug, when we get to the point where we are purged of our attachment to the things that we grew up with. When we're purged of those things and we have more of a focus on heaven, then Jesus will. When enough people are purged and refined, that's when Jesus is going to return. So between now and then, it has to happen, ladies and gentlemen. But I just want to encourage you, even though you may think that you're not brave now or you don't have the strength now, that's good. It's not your strength that will do it. It's not us that does it, Doug and Joe. It's the strength of Jesus and of God.
Nathan,
He's going to be there for you.
Right, and I just would like you to speak to the people that we have listening tonight, and we have a lot of them who are infirmed. They could be, younger. They're infirmed. They're not in good physical shape. The elderly, they're alone. And it's easy to be afraid or to become scared or afraid. And they have no one. We're talking, your words, Nathan, are falling on people's ears who are alone. They have no one in their family, no one to take care of them. They're by themselves. So speak to them as well. And you are, but if you can just add a message, a special message to them.
Well, it's the same message that I've been sharing for several years, and this is something that God had to show me, Doug, when I went through my pouring out process several years ago when I was crippled for a while, when I busted my ACL, and I had met financial calamity. This is years ago when I lived in Colorado. And at that time when it first happened, I didn't understand. I felt so alone. We were abandoned. At that time, we had a little house church. And after I got injured, not one of the people from the house church helped us. We didn't understand. It was a time of a lot of tears between my wife and I, and this is something I've never shared. Well, I might have shared it on one of my programs, but we were so destitute at that time. But God had to let me go through this, Doug, because I had to be able to understand and relate what it felt like to be abandoned. But we became so destitute that we would, at night, when it got dark, when we lived in Colorado, we went dumpster diving. That's how we survived. And what we did is we went to apartment complexes and we looked for, by the way, it's a good idea, actually. I know it sounds humble and low, but the apartment complexes that regularly would kick people out, they'd put all their furniture by the dumpster, and we went there and took the furniture and sold it on Craigslist. That's how we survived for several months.
Wow.
And there's a process of death to tell yourself, wow, the only way I can feed my family is I'm looking in dumpsters. But after the pride was gone, God showed me that through health that was gone, I mean, He stripped me of everything. He stripped me of my confidence in my strength because I was crippled. He stripped me of my financial ability because He allowed us to experience poverty at the lowest level of dumpster diving. And it was in that lowest point when we were abandoned by what we thought were friends. It was at that lowest point where I rediscovered who Jesus really is when He said, I am a friend that sticks closer than a brother. I'll be there for you. That's what it takes, Doug. So for the people that are listening that might be there, and I know there's a lot, my friend, my lonely friend out there, Jesus sticks closer than a brother. Cast your cares to Him because He's the one that can comfort like no one else can. He can do it. And through the tears that you may be shedding, God sees them. He sees the cry of your heart and the scars. He sees it. But He can be there. So just call out to Him. It's as simple
Amen.
as that, Doug.
You know, we all have gone through the dumpster diving process. I mean, I'm not afraid to admit that, and I know. Thank you for stating that. Maybe not all of us, but a good lot of us. And you know, I look back, and I mean, it's still tight, but well. There's nothing more I can add to that except it does do something to your spirit, but it also lets you know that I mean, if your heart's in the right place, you know you will get through it. Yeah.
And that's what we have to continually get back to that, Doug. I know that there's anger. You know, you're killing my flag. The bird's dying. The eagle's dying. How dare you? There's a portion of that. And that's valid, but after that's all said and done, who are we? Are we just Americans, right, or are we Christians? What are we destined for?
What's our identity?
We're destined for the end of our road.
Right.
So let's behave like warriors for God.
Amen.
You know, there's a story in when we look at the account of, you know, when in the book of Samuel, when the ark got taken away.
The Ark of the Covenant, yes. Yes.
Eli was the high priest, and his two boys, Hophni and Phinehas, were his misbehaving, and they were embarrassing the temple of God.
Right.
And in the past, when Israel had gone to battle, when God was on their side, they always won, and the Philistines knew it. Well, in this season of Israel's history, God was going to allow Israel to get spanked. And, of course, Israel didn't believe it. But little Samuel told Eli that it was going to happen. And Eli went to battle with the Philistines, and they were feeling puffed up and confident. And in 1 Samuel chapter 4, it says that the Philistines, when they saw the Israelites coming, they were afraid because the Israelites were full of themselves and puffed up. So the Philistines were afraid. In verse 7, because it says God has come into their camp. But the captain, now watch this, Doug, the captain of the Philistine army chastised them because they were whimpering and acting fearful. And he said, listen, in verse 9, he said, be strong and conduct yourselves like men, you Philistines, so that you don't become their servants. Be like men and fight. In other words, what he was saying, and wow, how amazing, the pagans, the heathens, the enemies of God, actually had more sense at that time than the Israelites. But basically what he was saying was this: if you're going to go to battle and you're going to die like men.
Right.
Die with your dignity. Don't die whimpering. Don't die with your tail between your legs. And, you know, Doug, that's one thing that we all have. Now, if we died in sick bed or instantly in an accident, that's one thing. But if we ever had the opportunity to have a gun to our head, one thing that they can never take away from us, Doug, is how we die. They might be able to take away your death, but they can't tell you how to die. So I want to say this also, ladies and gentlemen. If the time ever came where you had the choice, die like a man and die like a woman of God, because that is your choice. I know that's not easy.
Important words.
But our brethren in Kenya did it.
Yes.
It's just a choice. And the minute someone makes that choice that says, okay, so you're going to send me to heaven to see my people, fine. Doug, I truly believe this. When someone makes the decision to do that, God's grace will kick in and envelop that person with an anointing of the Holy Spirit. That's an anointing that there's no way a human being alive up to that point has ever experienced. I believe that there's a martyr anointing. And that martyr anointing, once the person decides Jesus, will envelop the person and be a bubble on them so that they have peace while it happens. That's what happened to Stephen when he was being stoned in the book of Acts. The martyr anointing came on him, and he saw the Son of Man standing.
Right.
Remember that?
Yes.
So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get a hold of this. Now, Doug, I just have a few minutes left. I want to shift gears in the last remaining minutes.
Before you do, Nathan, let me just say this very quickly. For those interested, on HagmanandHagmann.com, right underneath, on the right-hand side, right underneath Nathan's name, in Nathan Leal for tonight's program, are the 3 PDF documents Nathan was talking about: the resettlement, internment resettlement operations, the link to that, the link to the other 2 documents that you're talking about. So I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that folks, if you want them, they're right there on the right-hand side, HagmanandHagmann.com, right underneath Nathan Leal's name.
Okay.
Go ahead, Nathan. All right, sir, go ahead.
If you go to the bottom of my notes page, Doug, I just got a few minutes, but it says the Jade program from Carnegie Mellon. Do you see that link?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you have the link or if you see it, click on that. And I want to ask this from everybody. If you have the ability, did yours open up, Doug?
Yes.
This is a link to Carnegie Mellon University. It's a college website that shows this is an archive of the Jade program in its infancy. And I want to ask everybody that has the ability, download and screen capture this thing. Try to get as many of the images on here that you can. There's a lot of information on this website. It shows exactly what the Jade computer program is. And let me just... Now, the disclosure that came out a few weeks ago, it was a PDF, but it didn't have all these images. The Jade computer program consists of 3 other programs put together, and they're called the Prodigy program, the Format 2 program, and the Parka program. Now, Doug, in my research, I was able to find out that these 3 programs have been in development since the mid-'90s, almost 20 years.
Wow.
20 years they've been working on this. And what it does, the Prodigy program, it's an AI program, and back then, I have some screen captures of the actual user interface, and you can see, like if you click on the slides right there, the program, what it does is it takes a scenario and it learns from it, and then it offers suggestions. So it's an actual AI, artificial intelligence program that has been in development for 20 years, and they call it case-based initiative planning, and that's the Prodigy portion of it. And then the format portion stands for force management and analysis. So that's another part of the operation, the theater of operation. And then PARCA takes parallel knowledge from what's happening in the operation, and between those 3 things, it spits out the suggestions for what the military can do. And if you just go in there and start clicking some of the links, Doug, have you done it? Do you see all these images of the screen captures?
Yep.
Incredible. Do you see all these?
That's a great find, Nathan.
There's a lot here.
Yep.
So, and in fact, if you're on the home page and you go down technology demonstration, highlights, detailed sequence, full system view. Do you see that, Doug?
Yep. I got it right here. Yep.
Okay, look at that image. Look all the things that you see there.
That's quite a complex.
Go ahead and share what you see. It's incredible.
Yeah. This is obviously, I mean, yeah, it's all spelled out in the highlights, the detailed sequence of events. It's all spelled out here, but that full system view is perhaps the most comprehensive view or illustration of this program.
So I want to encourage the sleuths out there, the detectives, the Columbos, because, Doug, we have a lot of smart listeners, a lot of gifted listeners. And if you fit that mold, ladies and gentlemen, please take this information and run with it and spread this throughout. If that happens, though, Doug, there's a chance this is going to be taken down. So I just happened upon it. I was trying to find out if this college had in its servers this information, and here it is. So, ladies and gentlemen, there are hundreds and hundreds of slides and screen captures of the Jade computer program here. But, Doug, this is from about 15 years ago. So the program now it's evolved way more than what we see right here. So I also want to say this. For those in the Utah Boiler Room, this is not classified. It's the Carnegie Mellon. If it slipped your hands, it's for public consumption. I didn't use anything classified, Doug. It's right here, so you can't come after me for this. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, get familiar with this, share it, and spread the word. And I see that we're running out of time, Doug, so I'll stop with that. Thank you for having me.
Brother, I'll just say this: I did link that document underneath the PDFs, underneath your name on the right-hand side of Hagmann and Hagmann, so people can find it there. And you know what, Nathan? What a fantastic show tonight! What a great show! And
thank you for your hard work, your research, putting together the page for the show images to be able to share with, so listeners can follow along. All the time and effort that you put in, even when you were and have been under the weather. I know you've been working yourself to the bone, and we can't thank you enough, and our listeners can't thank you enough for turning it around and sharing all this information on our show with them.
Absolutely, my friend. God bless you, and thank you for all you've done and all you continue to do, Nathan. And thank you for doing it in the spirit and of the spirit. We really appreciate that. It's a different take on what's normally found out there.
Thanks for having me, gentlemen. Until next time.
God bless you.
God bless.
All right.
Thanks, Nathan, folks, and family.
Yeah, and give your wife a big hug for us for sharing sharing you and your time tonight.
That'll do it for this week. Next Monday, we will have Timothy Alberino and Steve Quayle with us. Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern. Not going to want to miss it unless something very important or earth-shattering happens. over the weekend, then we will see you guys back here on Monday.
We will take to the airwaves, and just understand that we will take the airwaves during the weekend if necessary. And again, I just want to reiterate the fact that go to the Hagmann.com on the right-hand side under PDF files. You'll find 4 links. The last link is not a PDF file. It's a link to the Jade project. Go ahead, sir.
I want to thank Chance from American Survival Wholesale, John, Jeannie, for the people that are working behind the scenes with H&H Connections. You guys have done a fantastic job, and so many people continue to reach out, and we can't thank you enough for all the people that are volunteering their time with that initiative. Until next week, God bless, stay safe, and have a great weekend.